The Wandering Soul Planet. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 226, Heavy Damage to Baboons. At this moment, the two smart guys decided that if they wanted to solve the problem of filing their stomachs during the lean period of spring, they had to target those herbivores that lived in groups, and the sheep naturally became their first choice. However, it seemed that the baboons were a little powerless to deal with the sheep. First, baboons are only good at attacking prey with their hands and not very good at using their mouths, so they have no deterrent effect on the sheep. Second, the baboons have no experience in catching sheep. Only the sheep's natural enemy, the wolf, is the best sheep hunter. So, if the baboons can subdue the wolf, then this sheep-catching plan has hope of being realized. It happened that at this time, a small group of, about a dozen, big gray wolves were seriously injured in the fight for the throne, leaving only 3 or 4 female wolves, a dozen young wolves and 2 male wolves that were dying in the fight for the throne. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the two smart ghosts follow me and teach you to lose weight immediately led hundreds of healthy male baboons to capture this group of wolves that did not have much fighting power. At the beginning, the female wolves that still had some fighting power fought hard and bit 2 careless baboons to death. But later, the female wolves stopped resisting when they saw that the baboons did not harm them after subduing them all, and treated the injuries of the 2 seriously injured male wolves, and even gave them, including the young wolves, food and good care. Before long, they willingly surrendered to the baboon tribe, integrated into it, and became one of them. Half a month later, the two smart ghosts let the female wolves and the 2 injured male wolves lead dozens of baboons to catch sheep, while the dozen or so young wolves stayed in the baboon tribe and were taken care of by the baboons, as hostages. From then on, this situation of baboon-wolf cooperation began. The two smart guys also used this method to merge several small wolf packs one after another. Now, they have nearly 100 wolves. In order to strengthen the baboons and wolves' cooperation, the wise man teach you to lose weight remembered the trick of establishing the baboons and wolves cavalry, and soon got the unanimous approval of the leaders of the baboon tribe. It is better to ride a horse than to run away by yourself, right? Only a fool would not do it. 2 months later, a special cavalry team composed of 70 or 80 baboons and wolves began to appear. Hey! Not to mention, it's still in good shape, and it still has certain advantages against ordinary wild dogs, wild wolves and other animals. The leader of this group of baboons and wolves, the mandrill, follow me, and the chimpanzee instructor teach you to lose weight can actually integrate baboons and black wolves so well, it seems that they are quite capable. They are really good at it. In this way, in the spring when food is scarce, the two smart guys let the baboons cooperate to capture larger herbivores such as sheep and deer. In summer and autumn, there is no need to worry about food and drink because of the abundance of food. In winter, everyone hibernates. Only when they encounter a big enemy, the mandrill follow me will use his trump card baboon cavalry. The baboons cavalry defeated dozens of menacing wild wolves in their first battle in the spring and summer of last year. In the autumn of last year, the baboons cavalry went out for the second time. After a hard battle, they finally repelled the crazy attack of 70 to 80 wild boars, eliminated more than 30 wild boars, and lost 14 big gray wolves and 11 baboon cavalry, with outstanding results. This time, the baboons cavalry faced Honkser's field team, which was their third battle, and they also won a brilliant victory. Obviously, this group of baboons cavalry is now in high spirits and is a force that cannot be underestimated. Although this failure was not a fatal problem, it also attracted Honkser's attention. She had to find the opponent's weakness and attack the weakness to defeat the opponent. Soon, she found that the biggest weakness of the baboons was that their running speed was far slower than her field team. Otherwise her field team would lose even more miserably. In view of the weakness of the baboons, Honkser made a little trick and was determined to retaliate against the baboons and dampen their spirit. She decided to use her best method of ambush wolves, luring the enemy deep into the depths, to ambush this group of annoying baboons in a remote canyon. The long-awaited day finally came. The weather was clear, the spring was bright, the birds were singing, and the flowers were fragrant. The nature was a beautiful and peaceful scene. Little did they know that under this false appearance of peace and tranquility, there was a strong murderous intent. At noon, suddenly, a group of wild dogs with an important mission, A small field team of Hongser broke into the baboon tribe where the mandrills fled with me. They bit small animals and barked at big animals, making the baboon tribe flying and jumping and people panicking. After receiving the news, the two smart ghosts immediately dispatched their trump card army, the baboons and wolf cavalry, to come to the rescue. Unexpectedly, when the baboons and wolf cavalry arrived at the scene, those ignorant troublemakers had already fled. The troublemakers were very cunning. When the pursuers approached, they sped up their pace and ran away desperately. When they left the pursuers behind for a long distance and were far away, they slowed down again, and even stopped to wait for the pursuers to get closer before running. The troublemakers ran and stopped, only escaping without fighting, intending to tire the enemy out. This made the enemy angry. The group of baboon cavalry chasing them were so angry that they chased them desperately, wishing to catch up and tear the group of troublemakers into pieces. Because the mandrill, follow me, and the chimpanzee teach you to lose weight were too heavy to ride wolves. Therefore, they did not follow to chase. All actions were commanded by a baboon named Not Lazy. It is conceivable that this baboon commander, Not Lazy, must be a diligent baboon who will not give up until he achieves his goal and gains something. In this way, another tragedy will inevitably happen. Not long after, the baboon cavalry chasing after the troublemakers entered the ambush circle that Hongxier had set up in advance, a deep canyon. This is an excellent ambush point. The canyon is more than 300 meters long, with steep cliffs on both sides of the canyon. There are only two very narrow exits in front and behind, only for 2 or 3 wolfhounds to enter and exit. As all the baboon cavalry entered the ambush circle, Hongxier gave an order. In an instant, those burning arrows rained down from the sky, and a raging fire immediately ignited at both ends of the canyon. Then, many dry firewood and dead branches were thrown down from the cliffs on both sides of the canyon. Then, countless rockets were shot down from the cliffs, and these dry firewood and dead branches crackled and burned, and the fire burned more and more vigorously. Before long, the entire canyon turned into a sea of fire, and for a while, shrill screams were heard. Chapter 227, Rat Night Attack. About an hour later, this group of baboons were either fainted by the fireworks or burned to death by the fire. The leader of the baboons, Not Lazy, also failed to escape this catastrophe and went to the 18th level of hell to dig coal for the king of hell, if there is one. No one can be lazy there. Maybe that place is more suitable for Not Lazy. In this way, this group of seemingly powerful baboons was wiped out by Hongxier with a little trick. After Hongxier wiped out the main force of the two smart ghosts, the baboons, she led more than 600 fox-dog coalition forces to kill the nest of the baboon tribe where the mandrill fucked with me. The baboon tribe, which had lost its new force, faced a murderous coalition of foxes and dogs that was several times larger than itself. The baboons, including the mandrill follow me and the chimpanzee teach you to lose weight, were so scared that they fled and did not dare to fight. They either fled far away or climbed up the big trees and did not dare to come down. Hongxier ordered the fox archery team to fire resin rockets at the baboons hiding in the trees, scaring the baboons hiding in the big trees to jump to the farther trees. However, Hongxier did not let them go, but drove them over 20 or 30 miles in one breath until the baboons were frightened and no longer posed a danger to her fox friends. That night, Hongxier's tribe was very lively. Everyone brought back the enemies who were burned to death and fainted, baboons and big gray wolves, for dinner and had a big meal. No, it was several big meals. Everyone also took out a fruit wine brew last autumn to celebrate the victory. After destroying the baboon cavalry and driving away the two smart ghosts, the baboon tribe was overjoyed. Everyone ate and drank like crazy, which was even more lively than the New Year. Even Hongxier was drunk, not to mention the other fox friends. Everyone was drunk and lying on the ground, in a mess. No one could have imagined that after midnight, a disaster would suddenly fall from the sky. There was no sign beforehand. At about 4 o'clock in the morning, suddenly, thousands of mice surged out from the cave outside the mountain village like a tide. They squeaked and screamed, and rushed in without thinking, biting anything that smelled of meat. Whether it was the barbecued meat of the baboons and the big bad wolf on the table, or the fox friends who were sleeping, as long as they smelled the smell of meat, they would immediately climb up and bite and gnaw without mercy. This time, the foxes and wild dogs in the mountain village were scared to death, and they all cried and howled, complaining bitterly. God really loves to play tricks on people. In one day, the wind and water turn was staged again. There were crowded rats everywhere, It was really a rat mountain and rat sea. Almost every fox and wild dog was crawling with at least hundreds of rats. These fearless rats were biting everywhere like crazy, and some even defecated and urinated while biting, making these fox friends and dog friends covered in stinky feces. Many fox friends and dog friends had their noses or ears bitten off, and some were even blinded by bites. Most of them were bitten by rats and had bruises all over the ground. Of course, Honkser, the leader of the mountain village, was not spared. At least 200 rats launched a merciless attack on her. Fortunately, Honkser was drunk and sleeping in the innermost part of the cave. When her brothers and sisters in the cave were attacked by rats and cried loudly, she woke up. She climbed up and took a look, and was immediately stunned. Immediately, Hongsha turned around and hid in the small storage room behind her, which was used to store various valuables, and closed the wooden door made by her father, Hongmeo, to avoid the hundreds of mice that were about to chase to the door. Some of the fox friends were in pain, so they couldn't help but roll on the ground, and immediately crushed many mice to death. Everyone was surprised when they saw it. So everyone followed suit and rolled on the ground, and the cave was suddenly filled with the sounds of mice, dogs and foxes. People often say, 30 years in the east, 30 years in the west, but here, 3 minutes of success, 3 minutes of bad luck. Now it was the mice's turn to be unlucky. The mice were crushed to death on the ground in large numbers, and their bodies were piled up in every corner of the ground. At this moment, a shrill outcry suddenly came from outside the cave, and those mice that had not been crushed to death immediately ran away with their heads in their hands. In this night disaster, except for a few who were seriously injured and died of excessive blood loss, almost all foxes and wild dogs were injured to varying degrees. Only Honkser and red-haired old man were intact. Of course, the more than 100 fox friends who protected the pig fart couple to go to the big hospital for surgery also escaped this disaster. Honkser felt very guilty and blamed herself for this incident. Because she was not prepared in advance, she did not organize resistance and avoidance afterwards. She was frightened and hid in the storage room. She did not act like a leader at all. It was really wrong. She made a deep self-examination for this. However, no one had ever experienced such a bizarre thing, so naturally no one could have thought of it. Soon, everyone forgave Honkser and asked her to come up with a practical defense plan as soon as possible. First of all, Honkser thought of installing wooden doors at the entrance of each cave, especially the bedroom of the fox friends. This work would be made by a group of skillful foxes led by red-haired old man using the knives bought last time. Soon, Honkser found out how time-consuming and laborious it would be to make a wooden door without saws, planes, ink fountains and other human carpentry tools. So, she discussed with red-hair father how to get those carpentry tools. No mistake, 1 post, 1 content, 1 6, 1 9, 1 book, 1 forum. Red-hair father thought about it and felt that he seemed to have heard that apes had similar things. It seems that he has to barter again. But now, Honkser is short of food and grass, and is almost empty-handed. What should I do? There is no way. It seems that I can only find some small branches with branches and leaves and tie them together to make a very simple and rough door to make do. Although this cannot completely prevent the rats from getting in through this branch and leaf door, it will at least make it difficult for the rats to enter, and the rats will not be able to swarm in like last time. In order to get revenge, Honkser also decided to send some clever fox scouts to investigate the origins of these rats and their dens, ready to catch them all in one fell swoop. At present, these 2 tasks have become Honkser's top priority and must be implemented immediately. It is not too late to prevent being attacked by rats again. After dawn, the first task of making a temporary rat-proof door was carried out in full swing under the leadership of red-hair father. Since it is not necessary to make a delicate wooden door like humans, but this kind of rough rat-proof door made of branches and leaves that cannot be rougher, it is still very easy to do. Chapter 228 Strange Monkey. In less than 3 days, almost all places that needed to install rat-blocking doors had installed these weird doors. However, the origin of the rats and their nests had not been found out, and there was no progress, which made Honkser very puzzled. What was even more surprising was that since the rat night attack, there had been no similar incidents, as if this incident had never happened. Over time, Honkser gradually forgot about it. About a month later, Honkser's village encountered another strange incident. Different from the baboons' cavalry and rat night attack, This time the monkeys imitated humans to use tree sticks to beat their friends, leaving them unable to resist and had to run away in panic. What was going on? It turned out that a wild dog team of Hongsar found a black-haired ape that was running for its life in panic and was seriously injured and almost fell into coma during an ordinary hunting activity. They couldn't help but feel compassion, so they lent a hand, saved the injured black-haired ape, and stopped the other 5 black-haired apes from chasing it. Unexpectedly, the 5 black-haired apes were furious, and they broke off branches as thick as wine glasses from nearby trees and used them as sticks to fight the field team members. However, Hongsar's hunting team was large in number and strength, with more than 100 of them, while the other side had only a few. No matter how powerful they were outnumbered and outnumbered. Not long after, the black-haired apes gradually became exhausted, and they were outnumbered and had to break through and escape. The captain of the field team sent a few wild dogs to escort the injured black-haired ape to the mountain village for treatment, and the rest of the field team stayed to continue hunting. At about 3 p.m., suddenly, everyone found that a large group of birds in the woods in front of them flapped their wings and flew up, screaming in the air. The thought that something must be going on suddenly flashed through everyone's mind. After a while, the branches and leaves in the forest were shaking violently, from far to near, one after another. Soon, a large group of black-haired apes jumped down from the trees, each holding a stick and running towards the field team. It turned out that this group of black-haired apes swung from one tree to another, rushing over from the air corridor of the forest. When they encountered vines, they hung on the vines, looked at the direction, and swung from one vine to another like a swing. When there were fewer vines and they couldn't grab their hands, they went directly to the high-altitude passage, grabbed the branches and jumped from one tree branch to another. In this way, their movement speed was very fast, far exceeding the speed of avoiding thorns on the ground. This is the unique movement ability of apes. Just now, the wild dogs had experienced the power of these black-haired apes holding sticks. Now seeing so many black-haired apes holding sticks coming at once, they suddenly felt cold sweat on their bodies and their spines were cold. After the shock, everyone immediately realized that a disaster was about to happen. If you can't win, run away. Without saying a word, the wild dogs turned around and ran back desperately, only hating that they ran too slowly. When Hongsar heard the news, she was stunned. This is really unlucky luck. Why did Hongsar's tribe encounter such strange things one after another this year? According to feudal superstition, this may be her destiny to have these disasters. However, according to Confucianism, it is a test from heaven to see if she has the ability to cope with big challenges and whether she is suitable to be the leader of this group of friends. At present, this group of black-haired apes with sticks are extremely difficult to deal with. They have simple weapons similar to those of ancient humans, sticks, and they can also walk on trees like flying. If you can win, they will fight you on the ground. If you can't win, they will climb trees and escape. It's really flexible up and down, advancing and retreating freely. For such a cunning and difficult enemy, Hongsar is really at a loss at the moment, and has no way out. At this time, a female fox signalman came in to report to her that the black-haired ape that was injured and unconscious had been carefully treated by the barefoot Dr. Red Hair Father and had now woken up. Hongsar hurriedly set off with the signalman to check on the wounded. In the medical room of Red Hair Father's cave, she saw a black-haired ape with shifty eyes, rolling eyes, and a sly head lying on a dirt bed covered with hay and yawning. Obviously, this is definitely a smart and clever black-haired ape. Maybe it is thinking about something in its mind now. When Red Hair Father saw Hongsar coming, he quickly introduced Hongsar and the black-haired ape. Although Red Hair Father is a red-haired savage, he also knows a thing or two about the language of apes and monkeys. No mistakes in one poem, one post, one content, one book, one forum, 1619, one book, one forum. However, for Hongsar, who knows thousands of languages of animals and insects, Feifei was instilled with this knowledge by scientists on this planet when she first arrived on this planet. See Chapter 6 Soul Transplantation. She is naturally familiar with the language of the black-haired ape, and there is no language communication barrier. Hongsar walked to the black-haired ape and asked it what its name was and where it came from. The black-haired ape said intermittently that its name was Tiankui, and it came from a peach blossom source Shuliandong in the West Mountain, about 100 or 200 miles southwest of here. The climate there is suitable, peach trees are in forests, and the blooming peach flowers are like large patches of pink clouds, which are extremely beautiful. There are many black-haired apes living in Shuliandong. Their tribal leader is called Lidajingyo. Under his leadership, everyone is keen on practicing martial arts, dancing with spears and sticks. Almost everyone has to lie down and complain every day before they rest. Moreover, their tribe also implements a system of rewarding the good and punishing the lazy. The winner will be awarded the honorary title of Black Ape Warrior, while those who are lazy will be caught and spanked with rattan or tree sticks, commonly known as beating with a board, as a punishment. In the evening, suddenly a fox signalman ran in to report to Hongser, "It's terrible. The black-haired apes are coming and have broken through our 2 lines of defense, killing more than a dozen of our brothers. Now they are attacking the 3rd line of defense. This is unbearable. Let's go and take a look." Hongser was shocked and hurriedly led everyone to run to the gate of the mountain stronghold outside the cave. Thinking back to the beginning, after Hongser led the team to capture this mountain stronghold, a total of 4 lines of defense were built. The first 3 lines of defense were below the halfway point of the mountain, and the last line of defense was at the gate of the mountain stronghold. Now the enemy is already attacking the 3rd line of defense. If this line of defense is lost, there will only be the last line of defense at the gate of the mountain stronghold. It can be said to be a war situation crisis. Arriving outside the mountain stronghold, Hongser saw that the enemy and us were engaged in a fierce battle at the 3rd line of defense halfway down the mountain. A dozen of our friends were standing high above, guarding the key points, and throwing stones down from the heights to block the attack of the black-haired apes. Chapter 229, Fierce Offensive. However, since our side consisted of small and medium-sized animals such as wild dogs and foxes, and they were small and weak, the stones and clods they threw were of no use to the 12 black-haired apes holding wooden sticks. If the road was not narrow and the terrain was not dangerous, so that the black-haired apes could only rush forward one by one instead of side by side, and could not launch an effective group attack, I am afraid that this fragile line of defense would have been broken by the black-haired apes long ago. Now we have fewer and fewer stones and clods of earth to throw. Once the ammunition and food are exhausted, the enemy will immediately break through the 3rd line of defense and attack the mountain village gate in a blink of an eye. Seeing that the enemy's offensive was getting more and more fierce and the situation was getting more and more critical, Hongser hurriedly ordered all the combat members of the village to gather urgently near the mountain village gate, and ordered everyone to immediately collect hay, dry firewood and other flammable materials, and pile them up 30 to 40 meters away from the mountain road outside the mountain village gate. At the same time, the Fox archery team quickly came to the mountain village gate to prepare to launch rockets to burn those dry firewood and other flammable materials to block the enemy's attack. At this time, it was nearly 8 o'clock in the evening. When all these preparations were basically completed, the enemy had already broken through the 3rd line of defense, killed all the guards on that line of defense, and was rushing towards the 4th and last line of defense, the line of defense at the gate of the mountain stronghold. 250 meters away from the burning object, 200, 150, 150 meters. Launch rockets. Hongser gave an order, and hundreds of burning resin rockets flew like meteors in the sky towards the pile of half-human hay and firewood. When the black-haired ape team ran to the distance of 3 or 4 meters from the flammable material, the pile of hay and firewood had turned into a raging fire, just blocking the enemy's offensive steps, which was really timely. After a while, Hongser gave another order, throw dry firewood, one by one. Branches with leaves flew towards the fire. Throwing from top to bottom, a distance of 30 or 40 meters was equivalent to a distance of more than 20 meters. Everyone threw it easily and accurately. The fire burned more and more fiercely, the heat wave rolled, the flames were pressing, and the enemy had to retreat more than 10 or 20 meters away to avoid the attack of the heat wave. Hongser directed everyone to continue collecting flammable materials such as dry firewood and branches, while urgently deploying the 4th line of defense to prevent any accidents. In addition, in order to be on the safe side, Hongser also arranged defenses at various dangerous passes in the mountain village to prevent the enemy from using the trick of openly repairing the plank road and secretly crossing Chenkang. Sure enough, 3 hours later, the sentry guard in the back mountain came to report that there were many black-haired monkeys climbing the cliffs of the back mountain. They had already passed the halfway point of the mountain and were rushing to the top of the mountain. Hongser was shocked when she heard it. While asking the second child Teoho to command the burning fire to resist the enemy battle at the front door of the mountain village for her, she led a large group of people to rush to the back door of the mountain village. When everyone arrived at the top of the back mountain, they happened to find that several black-haired monkeys had climbed to the top of the mountain with sticks in their mouths. Hongsar immediately ordered the field team members to rush up and make sure to eliminate all the enemies who climbed to the top of the mountain. The fourth lotus howled and led the wild dogs to pounce on the black-haired apes like hungry wolves hunting the prey. They bit and chopped them madly. 5 or 6 wild dogs besieged one black-haired ape. The black-haired apes finally climbed to the top of the mountain. They were exhausted. Before they could catch their breath, they were bitten by the vicious dogs like hungry wolves. How could they bear it and resist? Some black-haired apes raised their sticks and were bitten to death by the vicious dogs before they could beat them twice. Soon, these poor black-haired apes were killed by the pioneer death squad led by the fourth lotus. In an instant, several confused and tired black-haired apes climbed to the top of the mountain. In the blink of an eye, they were killed again. In this way, a few black-haired apes climbed up and were killed. Since this mountain is only a narrow place of 7 or 8 meters, it is relatively easy to climb. The rest of the place is almost a cliff and cannot be climbed. Therefore, no matter how powerful the black-haired apes were, even if they could fly over the eaves and walk on the walls, they could only climb to the top of the mountain from here, which determined that they could not rush up in a swarm, and only a few could come up at a time. They did not expect that every time they came up, they would die. This allowed Hongsar to wait for the enemy to tire and win more with fewer to eliminate the enemy calmly. After Hongsar led her troops to eliminate more than 30 black-haired apes, no more black-haired apes dared to climb the mountain here. It turned out that when the enemy commander climbed to the hillside of the back mountain, he only heard the shrill screams of the black-haired apes on the top of the mountain, but did not hear the screams of wild dogs and foxes. Therefore, the clever enemy commander immediately made a very wise decision: stop the attack and retreat immediately. Hongsar finally safely repelled the attack of the powerful enemy, and was frightened and sweated. Thinking about it, it was really scary. After the war, Hongsar began to pay attention to the three-dimensional defense of her mountain stronghold, especially the back mountain, which is conducive to the climbing of monkeys. She actually added an extra squad of soldiers to guard it. At the same time, she also added mobile sentries to carry out daily patrols at various dangerous passes, and increased defense on the defense lines in front of the mountain stronghold to ensure no mistakes. Obviously, she felt that there must be a reason for this sudden disaster. These black-haired monkeys lived and practiced martial arts in the water curtain cave in the peach blossom spring of the West Mountain. Why did they come to attack our mountain stronghold? It must be because we rescued the injured black-haired monkey named Slippery. So, what kind of secrets are hidden in this slippery black-haired monkey? We must ask clearly and find out the truth, otherwise we will be sorry for the dead foxes and dogs. No mistakes, one sentence, one post, one content, 1/6, one book, one bar, one look. Hongsar returned to the medical room of Red Hair Father and asked Slippery why he was chased by a large group of black-haired monkeys. However, the guy hesitated and refused to tell the truth. Hongsar was furious and threatened to return it to the group of vicious black-haired apes if it didn't tell the truth. The guy was frightened when he heard it, and had to tell the whole truth honestly. It turned out that the leader of the black-haired ape tribe, Lita Gao, had picked up an ancient martial arts secret book by chance, which included the illustrated stick kung fu. Lita Gao was overjoyed to get this treasure, and from then on he practiced this set of stick kung fu day and night, and finally he even practiced it well and good. Later, Lita Gao felt that his martial arts skills were too high, and he was simply rampant and invincible in this ape tribe. Without opponents, he gradually had a taste of lonely and defeated. As time went by, Tired felt that it was boring to practice alone every day, so it would be better to find someone to practice with. He raised his eyebrows and thought, I can't practice alone, I have to let everyone practice with me, otherwise I will be too tired, but they will feel comfortable. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 230, Martial Arts Secrets. In this way, an extremely rare phenomenon occurred. An ordinary black-haired ape tribe actually started a martial arts craze like ancient humans. On this day, the black-haired ape Tiankui, the second in command of the tribal leader Lady Gao, had an urgent matter to report to Lady Gao, So he rushed into the inner room of the tribal leader and found that Lady Jiao was hurriedly packing something like a book when he saw him coming in, as if he was very afraid of being seen by him. This surprised Liao Dakui and made him think a lot. Lady Jiao's abnormal behavior aroused Liao Dakui's strong curiosity, and he couldn't help thinking, could it be that our leader got some treasure and was afraid that others would see it and go to take it? What kind of treasure is that? Is it so important? It seems to be a book that ancient people read. If it is a book, it is so precious to him. What is it? Could our leader know how to read? It's so strange. I must find a way to find out the secret. From then on, Liao Dakui kept a watchful eye and often sneaked into Lady Jiao's inner room at night unnoticed to check Lady Jiao's secrets. In the middle of the night of this day, Liao Dakui sneaked into Lady Jiao's inner room again. When Lady Jiao, the leader of the Black Ape tribe, was practicing in the inner room every night, he would not let other black-haired apes come in to disturb him, just like the ancient masters practicing in seclusion. During each practice session, Lady Jiao would ask a black ape guard to stand guard outside the inner and outer rooms to prevent other black-haired apes from coming in to cause trouble. Liu Dakui finally made it to the fourth watch before quietly sneaking to the outer door of the inner and outer rooms. He found that the black ape guard was sitting on the ground with his back against a cave wall, dozing off and snoring slightly. Seeing this, Liu Dakui was overjoyed and thought, this is really a gift from heaven. Then, he carefully stepped over the two black long-haired thighs of the orderly and slowly slipped into Lady Jiao's inner room. He found that Lady Jiao was sitting quietly on a straw mat and practicing with his eyes closed, probably practicing Kigen. A small oil lamp was lit on the cave wall, and a thread-bound book was placed on a stone slab. The book had been opened and spread out on the stone slab, and there were clear black and white line drawings of ancient people practicing martial arts in the book. Wow! It turned out to be a book about martial arts secrets. What a treasure! No wonder it cherishes it so much. At this time, Lady Jiao, who was practicing, seemed to have entered a state of ecstasy, as if he was asleep, and was unaware of the slight noise outside. Liu Dakui was so nervous and excited that he immediately stretched out his long hairy black ape arms to grab the precious book and turned to leave the inner room. After leaving the inner room, he immediately quickened his pace and ran away, but he forgot that there was a sleeping black ape guard at the door. In his haste, he was tripped by the guard's long black hair legs and fell to the ground. The guard woke up and shouted, "Who?" Liu Dakui was so scared that his soul flew away. He immediately got up and ran out with the precious book. When the guard saw it, he immediately shouted, "There is a thief, catch the thief," and got up and chased after it, chasing Liu Dakui closely. However, it was not yet dawn, and Liu Dakui really lived up to his name. In just a short while, he slipped into the woods and disappeared. In this dark night, it was as difficult as finding a needle in a haystack to find a black ape hiding in the woods. The guard knew that it was unlikely to catch this inexplicable thief, so he had to return to the original place. Unexpectedly, Lady Jiao, who was practicing with his eyes closed, was awakened by the guard's call. He opened his eyes and saw that the precious martial arts secret book was missing. He was immediately anxious and angry, and his whole body was practicing. The airflow in his body was running everywhere, and he felt very uncomfortable. He couldn't help but punch and kick everything around him to vent his violent anger. After about 2 or 3 hours, Lady Jiao finally kicked and exhausted himself, and his anger disappeared a lot, and his breath gradually returned to normal. When Lady Jiao calmed down and realized that his precious book was really stolen, he couldn't help but be furious again, and immediately called the guard in to question him carefully. The guard knew that he was in great danger, and was so frightened that he trembled and stammered, unable to speak a complete sentence. Lady Jiao was so angry that he kicked the confused, sleepy and pitiful guard black ape in the chest, killing it. Then, Lady Jiao urgently gathered all the apes in the tribe to find the thief. At this time, the sky was just getting light, and everyone got up from the straw mat bed with sleepy eyes, and ran to the tribal playground with the old and the young together. An hour later, Lady Jiao found out that only Slippery, an old woman and a child were not there. Obviously, the old woman and the child could be ruled out, and the target was Slippery. At this time, Slippery was really slipping away too fast, and now he has escaped 100 miles away through the air corridor in the woods. It fled forward for hundreds of miles. When it fled far enough and thought it was completely safe, it found a suitable place to live and began to study this precious book that was not easy to get. This book Secrets of Martial Arts has text and illustrations, but Slippery is not a human being, so he is naturally illiterate. There is no mistake in the book. Although the explanations of martial arts in the book are accompanied by illustrations, the illiterate Slippery can only roughly understand the parts of the book related to martial arts movements. Of course, it is also a half understanding, and the textual explanations of Kigen and other parts are even more incomprehensible. In fact, this precious book in the hands of the black ape Slippery is tantamount to wasting heaven's gift. Slippery is also very angry and headache about this, and just wants to find a teacher to help it explain it. In this way, the black ape Slippery only practiced a martial arts movements according to the diagrams, and its martial arts progress was very limited, just more flexible and changeable than before. As the saying goes, if you practice martial arts without practicing Kigen, it will be in vain in the end. Slippery, who was unable to practice Kigen, did not make much progress after practicing for more than 2 months. When he met someone with slightly better martial arts than him, he had to continue slipping away. Just 2 days ago, he happened to meet a few black-haired apes from Slippery's original tribe, and they kept tracking him, which led to the first fierce battle since Honkseer's team occupied this mountain stronghold. If it weren't for Honkseer's wise and decisive command, this mountain stronghold would have fallen into the hands of the enemy with blood flowing and corpses everywhere. This kind of unwarranted disaster makes Honkseer terrified when she thinks about it. Chapter 231, Burning the Pass. Since Slippery praised the martial arts secret book so much, Honkseer was eager to see it. She was a super genius who knew thousands of languages, and she had hardly encountered any language she couldn't understand. Thinking of this, Honkseer asked Black Ape where the precious book was hidden now. Black Ape Slippery told her that the martial arts secret book was placed in the dense forest about 180 miles away from the mountain village in the west. Ah, so far away. Honkseer thought, this is troublesome. It's not that the journey is too far, but if we are intercepted by Black Ape subordinates who are tired to scream on the way, it will be bad. After all, the strong fighting power of the group of black-haired apes holding tree sticks is obvious to all. Hey, what can I do? At present, going to get the book is really full of crises. Hey, if I also know martial arts, or if there are people who know martial arts in my team, it will be easy. Thinking of this, Honkseer decided to wait until dawn and send her most capable fox scouts to the surrounding tens or hundreds of miles to conduct a careful reconnaissance to see if there were any ambushes or interceptions by the tired tribesmen. Sure enough, the next afternoon, the foxes who went out for reconnaissance came back one after another to report that there were signs of enemy ambushes and guards at several important checkpoints leading out of the mountain village. It seems that if this vicious enemy is not eliminated, Honkseer and her tribe will not be able to get books, and even daily activities such as hunting will be greatly affected. So how to do it? Hard fighting is absolutely not allowed. Although Honkseer's fox friends have an absolute advantage, a strong attack will inevitably result in too many casualties to bear. Strong attack doesn't work, so the only way is to outsmart it. How to outsmart it is another problem that Honkseer is facing and gives her a headache. After repeated thinking, Honkseer decided to adopt a 3-step strategy to eliminate this enemy. First, find a way to drive this group of enemies from all the passes to one place. Second, lure most of the enemies to one of our ambush circles and annihilate them. Finally, eliminate all the remaining enemies. This idea seems good, but it is not so simple to do it. Since black-haired apes, like humans, have night blindness, Honkseer decided to send out a night commando team. In the middle of the night, they left a pass that was the most difficult to attack, and set fire to the other passes about 180 meters away. They planned to burn these passes and the flowers, plants and trees nearby, and drive the enemies in these places to the only pass that was not threatened by the forest fire. Unexpectedly, it suddenly rained heavily that night, and it rained intermittently for 3 days. This was really bad weather. Honkseer had no choice but to postpone her battle plan. On the 4th day, the rain stopped and the sky cleared up. On the 5th day, the sun was shining all day, the spring was bright and the weather was good. At about 10 o'clock that night, Honkseer decisively ordered to start the action. She personally led a night commando team with dry firewood, hay and other flammable materials and flint to set a fire at an important pass occupied by the enemy. The other 2 key places in the enemy-occupied areas were led by the female dogs Lotus and Plum Blossom respectively. And the second Peach Blossom was left to guard the mountain village to prevent accidents. Before setting off, Hongsar asked the foxes with flexible hands and feet to use thinner vines to tie a small pile of hay and dry firewood to the back of each commando, wild dog. After arriving at the destination, the wild dogs would bite off the vines tied to each other's bodies with their mouths to remove the flammable materials. Each night commando team was equipped with 50 foxes responsible for gently knocking stones to light the fire. When Hongsar and her men arrived at the designated pass 150 meters away from the outer perimeter, it was exactly midnight. So Hongsar ordered the commandos to quietly disperse. Each of them needed to find their best position to hide, and then everyone moved forward quietly. When they were less than 100 meters away from the pass, Hongsar whispered to everyone to stop and lie on the ground, and then she asked everyone to choose a place with more grass or trees, and began to unload hay and firewood and other flammable materials to ignite the nearby flowers, plants and trees. Soon, the fire was burning fiercely, and soon ignited all kinds of weeds and trees nearby. A long-planned military operation of burning mountains to drive out the enemy was finally successfully launched. The other 2 assaults on burning mountains to drive out the enemy were also carried out as scheduled and were a complete success. Not long after, the enemy had to abandon the guarding of these 3 strategic locations' important passes, and retreated to the only pass that was not attacked by fire. Hongsar's first step of the battle plan was completed very smoothly. The next second step was the most critical and difficult step, luring the enemy deep or luring the enemy into the trap. Just like fishing, you must have good or very fragrant bait to lure the enemy to take the bait. So what kind of bait should be made so that the enemy will be willing to be fooled? Our current enemy is the black ape hunting team of the Tired tribe. They are most interested in the black-haired ape called Slippery, so for them, this Slippery is the most fragrant and best bait. As long as this slippery black-haired ape is released, it will inevitably attract enough attention from the enemy, and there is no fear that they will not come to take the bait. No mistakes, 1 post, 1 content, 1.6, 1 book, 1 bar, take a look. Thinking of this, Hongsar suddenly became excited and immediately began to arrange her second step of the action plan. However, it rained heavily again the night after the fire checkpoints, and the fires at the 3 checkpoints were extinguished in time, avoiding the occurrence of large-scale forest fires. In fact, Hongsar also calculated this in advance, so she dared to set fire to the mountain boldly. However, it was early summer now, and the heavy rain lasted only 1 night. The heavy rain stopped the next morning. After midnight that night, Hongsar personally led 2 field teams, 150 wild dogs in each team, each with enough dry branches tied to its back, and 3 rocket teams, 40 foxes in each team, each with a small flint in its mouth, to quietly set up an ambush in the famous canyon more than 20 kilometers away from the mountain village. After daybreak, the mountain village began to carry out the follow-up tasks arranged by Hongsar last night. The second female dog, Teoho, still led a field team and 2 fox rocket teams to guard the mountain village. In addition, there was a field team that escorted the pig fart couple to the hospital for surgery and had not returned yet. Around 10 a.m., the 4th female dog Lotus and the 5th female dog Plum Blossom led a team of 150 wild dogs to escort the fast-moving black-haired ape. In broad daylight, they swaggered down the mountain from the front gate of the village. Chapter 232, A Strategy to Lure the Enemy. As the saying goes, all is fair in war. What is real is fake, what is fake is real, what is real is fake, and what is fake is real. On the surface, it seems that this group of wild dogs intends to escort Slippery to another place. In fact, they deliberately let the enemy, the group of black-haired apes, find out in order to attract the enemy to chase the group of wild dogs. Sure enough, the 2 black-haired apes responsible for scouting and monitoring Hongsar village quickly reported the news to the leader of their black ape hunting team. It turned out that the commander of this team was none other than the leader of the black ape tribe, the chief of the tribe, Lida Gao. This time, it was not easy to find out the true whereabouts of Slippery. After losing the precious book, Lida Gao was so distraught and anxious that he lost his parents. How could he sit still? So, he personally led almost all the elites of his tribe, a total of 138 strong and good black-haired male apes, to chase after him. After the previous attacks on the mountain were frustrated, Lida Gao was full of anger and had no place to vent, so he had to divide his troops to guard the key points to prevent and monitor these bad friends from going out. Unexpectedly, the other 3 passes occupied by Lida Gao's team were unexpectedly attacked by Hongsar's troops in the middle of the night, the day before yesterday. This made Lita Gao, who had calmed down a little, furious again. He thought, I am not going to attack your mountain stronghold, which is already polite to you. You dare to come out and set fire to me. It's really lawless. At this time, Lita Gao heard from the spy in front that the enemy actually escorted Slippery to move to another place, which made him furious. Impulsiveness is the devil. Lita Gao fell into the trap as soon as he acted impulsively. Without thinking, he decided to lead all the remaining troops and horses, about 100 and more black-haired apes, to chase the wild dogs who escorted Slippery to move. At the same time, the team pretending to escort Slippery to transfer had also reached the foot of the mountain and soon split into two parts. One part was led by the fourth female dog Lotus and 100 wild dogs escorting Slippery to speed up and run towards the canyon. The other part was led by the fifth female dog Plum Blossom, and 50 wild dogs with nimble legs and fast running were walking slowly and leisurely behind, waiting for the enemy to catch up. The purpose was naturally to prevent the enemy from getting lost and not knowing how to get to the ambush circle. Someone shouted, "Run faster! The enemy will catch up soon." The black ape Slippery was so scared that it seemed like its butt was on fire. In less than 2 minutes, it ran to the front of the team and ran desperately towards the canyon. It ran faster than a rabbit. It was really slippery. This canyon was the canyon where Honkseer's team ambushed and wiped out the baboon cavalry. Is history going to repeat itself again this time? If this is true, then this canyon can be called the real Death Canyon. About an hour later, the fourth female dog Lotus led 100 wild dogs to escort a fast team into the canyon, and the rearguard team led by the fifth female dog Miho with 50 wild dogs was about to be chased by the black ape hunting team led by Lita Gao. They were also running desperately towards the canyon. A decisive and key battle, the battle to ambush the black ape hunting team, was about to begin. At this time, because the canyon road was too narrow and inconvenient to pass, the front team led by the fourth female dog Lotus to escort fast was actually crowded and blocked, and the team's forward speed suddenly slowed down, and the follow-up team led by the fifth female dog Miho was also approaching the canyon. The fourth female dog Lotus was so anxious that he had to stop and shouted loudly, asking everyone not to squeeze and line up to pass through the canyon entrance in front. This chaotic situation was largely caused by Honkseer's lack of consideration in advance. Why do you say that? There are two reasons. First, there are too many wild dogs pretending to escort Slippery this time. It would be better if there were only 1/3 of the current number. Second, a large amount of dry firewood and branches should not be piled up near the gorge too early, which is tantamount to hindering her team's escape. Of course, the reason for the above situation is the result of Honkseer's overly cautiousness. At this moment, Honkseer, who was ambushing on the cliff above the gorge, also found that it was not good, so she quickly sent a group of foxes down to move the flammable materials blocking the narrow road entrance so that the troops could pass smoothly. After a while, the follow-up troops led by the fifth Plum Blossom also entered the gorge one by one. Seeing that the troops of the fourth Lotus in front were still blocked at the gorge and progressed slowly, Plum Blossom was so anxious that he jumped and complained bitterly. In a hurry, the fifth Plum Blossom had to lead all her troops into the canyon, and turned around to let the 50 wild dogs desperately block the entrance of the canyon to prevent the enemy's pursuit from entering, so that the troops led by the fourth Lotus in front to escort Slippery had enough time to escape through the canyon. In this way, the team led by the fifth Plum Blossom to lure the enemy into the trap became the real rearguard team. Obviously, her forced temporary decision was undoubtedly very correct, which made the play of pretending to escort Slippery to move to new residence more realistic. This was also a situation that Honkseer had not thought of in advance, and it was really God follows people's wishes. However, in this way, Honkseer's team would inevitably suffer relatively large casualties. No mistake, one song, one post, one content, one book, one bar, 1-6, 1-9, one book, one bar, 1 bar. There is no way to do this. After all, there is gain and loss, and things are always divided into two. Because the road at the canyon entrance was extremely narrow, the escort troops led by the fourth brother Lotus were very slow to get out of the canyon entrance in front, while the rearguard team led by the fifth brother Plum Blossom desperately blocked the enemy's crazy attack at the canyon entrance in the back, and the casualties were getting bigger and bigger. She had led the team to repel the enemy's attacks more than a dozen times. At this time, the group of foxes sent by Honkseer had already gone down to the canyon entrance in front and moved away the flammable materials such as dry firewood and branches that had been piled up in advance. In this way, The troops of the fourth brother Lotus filed out of the canyon entrance more smoothly. And after a while, almost all of them escaped through the canyon entrance. Unfortunately, the rearguard team of the fifth brother Plum Blossom was bitten by the enemy's pursuers, and now they only had a dozen wild dogs left, and were approaching the canyon entrance in front while fighting and retreating. At this time, the Black Ape pursuit team led by Tide to Call had all entered the canyon. Now is the perfect time to launch a fire attack, and opportunities are fleeting. If they are a little slow, the enemy will chase them out of the canyon and the entire battle plan will be ruined. However, the fifth Miho is still entangled with the enemy in the canyon. If they set fire now, the fifth Miho will also be buried in the sea of fire with the enemy. Chapter 233 Successfully destroyed the enemy. What to do? What to do? Oh my god. Honksar was so anxious that she was sweating all over. Seeing that the enemy was about to leave the assault circle, if she didn't set fire, all the plans would be ruined, and the consequences would be disastrous. At this critical moment, the fifth Plum Blossom shouted, "Set fire quickly and shoot arrows at me." This shout woke up Honksar, who was still hesitating. Seeing this, Honksar burst into tears and had to order, "Set fire. Light the rockets and shoot." The Fox archery team, which had been ready and waiting, immediately fired countless rockets at the canyon mouth in front, and suddenly, a raging fire broke out at the canyon mouth. At the same time, Honksar's troops threw a lot of dry firewood, dry branches, hay, and other flammable materials from the cliff to both sides of the cliff and the back canyon mouth. Then, countless resin rockets were shot down from the cliff, and in an instant, a raging fire crackled around the canyon. At this moment, the fifth Plum Blossom shook off the entanglement of the enemy's pursuers, turned around and ran towards the canyon entrance without hesitation. She bravely rushed into the raging fire, and jumped through the firewall several times in a row. She actually escaped, which surprised Honksar and her subordinates. The fifth Plum Blossom was really good at escaping from the sea of fire. Not only did she not get swallowed by the fire and save her life, but she was also slightly injured, only some of her fur was burned. It was a great thing to be thankful for. Seeing this, Honksar immediately ordered to hide multiple times more flammable materials at both ends of the canyon to prevent the enemy from learning to escape from the ambush circle from the fifth Plum Blossom. Obviously, the enemy was not as brave as the fifth Plum Blossom to rush into the sea of fire. In addition, the enemy only saw the fifth Plum Blossom jumping into the fire, but did not see the fifth Plum Blossom escaping outside the firewall, so they did not dare to learn rashly. They thought that the fifth Plum Blossom had been burned to death by the fire and turned into ashes. When Honksar confirmed that the enemy dared not rashly cross the firewalls at both ends of the canyon to escape, she ordered everyone to throw dry firewood, dry branches, hay and other flammable materials to the gathering place of the Black Ape hunting team led by T-Digito in the canyon, and then let the Fox archery team launch resin rockets at these firewood piles. In an instant, a raging fire broke out in the canyon, and the enemy was in a panic, crying and howling, and even begging for mercy and surrender. However, it is too late to say anything now. What did you do earlier? Besides, Honksar would not be stupid enough to put out the fire and rescue this group of fierce and terrible enemies now, right? Her brain was neither clamped by the door panel nor kicked by the hoof of the big stupid donkey, so she naturally pretended not to hear it, and had to treat these miserable cries and pleas for mercy as a symphony from hell. This is a life and death war. Without a heart of stone, how can you lead troops to fight and become a leader of one side? The ancients said, one general's success is the result of the sacrifice of thousands of soldiers. This is how it came about. About an hour later, the Black Ape hunting team led by T-Digito was completely wiped out by Honksar's team. Because T-Digito was too impatient, he brought all his troops out. Therefore, after this battle, Honksar even skipped the third step of the battle plan, which was something she had not expected in advance. When the fire was extinguished, Honksar led her troops down the mountain to pick up bacon to eat. After scraping off the layer of burnt black charcoal on the bodies of the black apes that were burned to death by the fire, the inside was the black ape meat that was burned like bacon and was fragrant. This made the wild dogs and foxes salivate. The wild dogs couldn't wait to catch it and gnaw it desperately, devouring it, and everyone was very excited. It seems that for Honksar's friends, this ambush can not only destroy the powerful enemy, but also eat the delicious bacon, which is really killing two birds with one stone, which is wonderful. Honksha saw that everyone was eating happily, so she followed the crowd and grabbed the burnt black ape's arm to bite it. After eating it, She found that it tasted good and fragrant. It tasted a bit like Korean barbecue. However, the black ape Slippery did not have this blessing. It couldn't eat its own kind, not to mention that it felt sick when looking at the corpse of its own kind, so how could it eat it? However, Slippery saw that everyone was eating happily, and felt that his stomach was rumbling with hunger, so he had to go to the woods to see if he could catch a rabbit or other small animals to eat. Slippery searched for a long time in the woods, but couldn't find any small animals like hares. Finally, he caught 1 or 2 frogs with great difficulty and had to make do with them to eat. At least it could fill his stomach. Seeing the pitiful appearance of Slippery who could only eat frogs, everyone couldn't help laughing. Some naughty foxes deliberately picked up a foot or half of the buttocks of the burned black ape and threw it to Slippery to let it eat. Unexpectedly, Slippery was so scared that he ran away, and everyone laughed so hard that they fell backwards and laughed so hard. From then on, everyone often used Slippery as a joke and made fun of it from time to time. Unexpectedly, this guy was quite good at it. He cooperated every time and made everyone laugh so hard that tears and snot came out. In this way, everyone simply gave this guy a nickname called Happy Pee, which means that it makes people so happy that they can't stop peeing. After this wonderful ambush, there were no strong enemies in the area of hundreds of miles around Hongseer's village. Next, what she had to do was to get the martial arts secret book mentioned by Slippery, now called Li Danu. Li Danu said that the martial arts secret book was hidden by it 180 miles away from the village. Because the journey was long and there were fears of accidents on the road, it might be delayed for several days, or even 10 days. No mistakes, 1 sentence, 1 content, 1 6, 1 book, 1 bar, 1 read. For this reason, Hongseer had to be very well prepared before she could set off. A week later, Hongseer and a second child Teoho personally led 2 field teams and 2 archery teams, led by Li Danu, and headed towards the hiding place of the precious book. The sky at dawn gradually changed from white to light blue, and then continued to fade, almost blue-white, hazy, as if separated by a layer of blue mist. Hongseer's team set out at dawn, and only walked 40 or 50 miles until the sun was about to set. It was all mountain roads, and the roads were not easy to walk. In fact, foxes and dogs have night vision. Wouldn't it be better to march at night? Little did they know that many wild animals also like to come out at night, such as tigers, bears, cheetahs, jackals, wolves, wild boars and other ferocious animals. In order to avoid unnecessary trouble, Hongseer finally decided to act during the day like humans. In addition, it is also convenient to hunt herbivorous animals that also like to move during the day, such as cattle, sheep, deer and roe deer. There are no main roads in this deep mountain forest, only small roads, and they are small roads for wild people or animal groups to walk on. It is not as good as the feudal society of our solar system Earth. At least at that time, there were roads for horse carriages, roads. Chapter 234, On the Treasure Hunt. Isn't this a bit too strange? On this planet with such advanced technology, there are not only no roads, but also no highways, let alone high-speed railways. So this is what happened. Since 30,000 years ago, the high technology of humans on this planet has been very advanced. No matter what size transportation tools, even cargo trains with a load of hundreds of millions of tons, are transported from the air, super flying saucers, giant aircraft carrier starships. This is fast and environmentally friendly, so why not do it? Because of this, humans pay less and less attention to the construction of transportation tools and roads on the ground, and simply ignore it. Therefore, various transportation roads on the ground have gradually become deserted, let alone reconstruction. In this uninhabited deep forest, there are not many ancient transportation roads built by humans, and now they are covered by various weeds and plants and even mudslides. Hongseer's team sometimes even had to cut through thorns and advance slowly and with great difficulty. Moreover, Li Danu ran from the air corridor in the woods, and his walking speed was naturally several times faster than now. Unfortunately, these fox friends could not climb trees, let alone swing on a swing, so they could only look at the trees and sigh. After dark, Hongseer had to order the foxes to camp on the spot for the night, and let the foxes collect some hay and dry firewood nearby, and build a fire. Everyone rested and slept around dozens of fires, and spent a silent night like this. Because everyone was very tired, they soon fell asleep. Fortunately, it was early summer now. In this forest at an altitude of more than 1,000 meters, the temperature was at least more than 10 degrees Celsius at night, not very cold, and a little fire would be enough. The next morning, everyone got up and ate some dry food brought from the mountain village, some barbecued black-eyed meat and beef and mutton, carried by a group of wild dogs, and drank some mountain spring water. Then, under the leadership of Hongxer, they began to continue on their journey. At about 8:30 in the morning, suddenly, there was a strong wind in front of Hongxer's team, and all kinds of small animals swarmed away from the team and fled. After a while, a gorgeous white tiger emerged from the weeds in the woods that were more than 1 meter tall on the side of the path in front, blocking the way of Hongxer's team. This white tiger, who didn't sleep during the day, looked at Hongxer's group of friends and said, "I opened this mountain and planted this tree. If you want to pass by here, leave me money to buy your way through." Wow! This is still an ancient tiger who only knows ancient Chinese and loves to rob. It's so funny. So, Hongxer decided to tease this attention-seeking outlaw tiger. I say, this outlaw hero who blocks the road and robs people's planting trees and repairing roads. Why does it sound like a village cadre shouting slogans to me? Unexpectedly, the outlaw tiger was dissatisfied and said, "You are such a country bumpkin. I am robbing." "Hey, did you hear me? Now is the robbery time. Can you please pretend to be scared?" Hongxer was happy when she heard it, and said to the tiger with a smile, "My king, we have an urgent matter and need to pass by you today. However, we don't know what kind of rule you set, and we forgot to bring money with us. Can you make an exception and let us pass by you? We will pay you back next time we come back." When the tiger heard it, his eyes widened, his eyebrows raised, and he said angrily, "My king, how can the rules set by me be changed at will? I never do business on credit." Seeing this, Hongxer had no choice but to spread her hands and said to the tiger with a smile, "What do you want?" The tiger thought for a moment and said, "That's easy. Leave the 2 wild dogs as my lunch today, and I will let you go." Hongxer was furious when she heard it. "If we don't agree, what are you going to do?" The tiger didn't even think about it, and said angrily, "Then I will kill you all." Hongxer laughed in anger and said, "Do you think it's possible? We have hundreds of experienced field soldiers. Are you confident that you can beat us?" The tiger calmed down when he heard it, and after thinking seriously for a while, he said, "Then what should we do? We can't let me starve, can we?" Hongxer patiently advised, "Why don't you catch those lone deer or lambs to eat? Wouldn't it be much better? Why bother to tear your face with us and fight hard, resulting in both sides being injured? What's more, it's summer now. Aren't you afraid of getting sick if you eat dog meat? Think about it carefully. We are not afraid of a fierce battle with you." Just when the silly tiger was hesitating, suddenly, a little white tiger came out from the grass beside the road. It took a look at Hongxer and the group of wild dogs and foxes, and whispered to the big white tiger, "Mommy, you don't really want to fight with these vicious dogs, do you? I saw a few fat roe deer not far ahead. Why don't we go catch them?" The tigress sighed and whispered to the little white tiger, "Little girl, why didn't you say it earlier? It made me feel so embarrassed that I couldn't get off the tiger for a long time." Then, the tigress said to Hongxer, "I'm in a good mood today, so I won't bother with you. Remember to leave money for the road next time." After that, she turned around and walked forward with the little white tiger. In a blink of an eye, they disappeared into the dense grass, as if it was just a dream. Hongxer shook her head and blinked her eyes, feeling a little incredible. Could it be that the king of the forest was sent away with just a few words? Does this mean that her trip will be blessed by God in smooth sailing? Take a look at the book forum without any mistakes. Hi. What are you thinking about? It is more important to hurry on. So Hongxer led her team and continued to move forward without stopping. At about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Hongxer's team encountered a female elephant giving birth to a baby elephant while marching. 2 male elephants, one big and one small, a father and son, were guarding nearby. When they saw Hongxer's group of friends coming, they thought they were robbers coming and immediately became furious. They immediately rushed towards Hongxer's team like tanks, scaring everyone to death and fleeing for their lives. In the end, everyone had no choice but to take a detour and escape the disaster safely. In the evening, Hongxer regrouped the team and came to a stream to drink water, wash and rest, and planned to camp there for the night. Suddenly, hundreds of colorful poisonous snakes of different sizes jumped out from the weeds on the right side of the stream and pounced on the exhausted wild dogs and foxes lying on the ground to rest. This sudden change made everyone panic and jump into the water in a hurry. crossing the stream and fleeing to the other side. Unexpectedly, the group of poisonous snakes did not chase everyone, but crowded to the stream to drink water, and after drinking enough water, they swam back leisurely. Chapter 235 Unexpected Results. Wow. Oh my god. Another false alarm. Isn't it just drinking water? Is it necessary to mobilize so many people? Do these snakes like mass sports? Hongsar could only smile bitterly at this inexplicable and strange phenomenon. On this journey to get the treasure, similar false alarms played out one after another, which could be edited into a thrilling TV series. At dawn, the edge of the morning sun was burning, and the orange-yellow turned into golden-red, gradually becoming hotter, rising, spreading, and projecting obliquely. The dense layers of leaves in the forest cut the round shadow of the sun into strands and scattered them on the ground. Hongsar led everyone to climb up the high hillside, and looking at the vast and undulating forest in front of them, she couldn't help but feel excited. I felt that there was a big lake as cold as a rainbow in my body, and suddenly a big vortex formed in the lake, and a group of migratory birds with long legs and beautiful hair rushed out one after another, with wet water droplets all over their bodies, and flew from the lake to the confusing front, passing through the dense green forest. This strange team composed of hundreds of fox friends and dog friends became a green range team because they were all covered with the green leaves, mosses and weeds. After wading across a small river, the team returned to its original appearance. After passing through a large area of dense red flower wild grass, they became a red special forces because they were covered with red petals all over their bodies. This is really people walking by the river will get their shoes wet. Just when everyone was having fun along the way, a scout in front came running to report, 500 meters ahead is a large lake, and there are dozens of ferocious crocodiles hiding in it. Obviously, it is almost impossible to pass through this lake directly. Hongsar hurriedly asked the team to stop temporarily and rest on the spot. At the same time, she called Li Daniu to ask, "What's going on? There's a big lake ahead. How can we get there? Did we take the wrong road?" Li Daniu blinked his eyes and said confidently, "We are not wrong. We will reach the lake in a while, and then walk another 20 or 30 miles to the right along the lake. We will see a big mountain range. After crossing this mountain range, passing a wetland and a small wasteland, and then walking another 30 or 40 miles along a big canyon, we will enter a natural primeval forest and reach our destination." Everyone finally arrived at this long-awaited primeval forest, but found that it was full of lush branches and leaves. Strange trees and flowers can be seen everywhere. The branches and leaves almost completely covered the sky. The vines clinging to the big trees grew in clusters, and some ferns covered the damp and dim places. The ground was fertile black soil, but unfortunately there was a lack of sunlight. Otherwise, the ground would definitely be full of various unknown plants. Each tree tried to grow in all directions, with tall and dense branches and leaves interlaced left and right, greedily catching every bit of sunlight. Even though the sun was still high in the sky, the forest was as dim as in the evening under the cover of leaves and branches. The old trees, with dead vines hanging on them, swayed in the dim light in the dim environment, like ghosts. Hongsar led her team, climbing high and low, cutting through thorns and brambles, and finally arrived at the place designated by Li Daniu after going through hardships. They were surprised to find that it was an ancient and huge tree like a locust tree that was more than 1,000 years old. The diameter of its roots was at least 3 meters. Li Daniu proudly told Hongsar, "There is a tree hole more than 10 meters above the ground in this tree. I hid the martial arts secret book in it. I will climb up now and take it out and give it to you." Before he finished speaking, he saw it climbing, and climbed up quickly as if walking on flat ground. Unexpectedly, suddenly, Li Daniu screamed in pain, "Oh my God! How could this happen? God is unfair to me. This is really the sin I committed in my previous life. It's over, it's over, it's all over, woo woo woo." As he spoke, he began to feel pain. Hongsar and her men who were gathered under the big tree were confused and puzzled, and hurriedly asked Li Daniu what was going on. After a long time, Li Daniu stopped crying, and came down from the tree, crying and dejectedly said, "The martial arts secret book was bitten into pieces by termites. If you don't believe me, look." As soon as he finished speaking, he stretched out his right hand and spread out his 5 fingers. His palm was full of beige paper scraps and a few termites that were crushed to death. Everyone looked at the sad and painful things in front of them, and they were silent, looking at each other, and wanted to cry but had no tears. Suddenly, a breeze came and blew away the pieces of paper in Li Daniu's hands. Those pieces of paper fell into the grass around them like snowflakes. Looking at Li Dongnu's bare hands and desperate expression, a feeling of failure immediately invaded Hong Xiao's body cells, and at the same time spread among all the members around. There was even a faint sound of suppressed and painful sobbing. Hong Xiao suddenly felt a sticky substance pouring out of her stomach, blocking her throat. Before she could make a sound, everything in front of her was pitch black. Shaking, erratic, chaos, a dark white. The strong airflow tore and squeezed her figure that seemed so small in the boundless sky. She could hardly see anything in front of her, and gritted her teeth and struggled desperately in the chaos. In a trance, she seemed to see a black shadow suddenly descending from the sky, lifting her up, soaring into the air, climbing up, reaching a high place and then falling down again. The dream was very dark, and there was water, countless cold waters, covering the sky, ruthlessly engulfing her whole body, and then spitting it out. Suffocation. Under the pull of a strong force, she was motionless and rose with the dark water waves, and then sank again. A real dream, or a dream-like reality? Then, it seemed that there was a huge force that tore herself into pieces. Some pieces turned into a dog, some turned into a fox, turned into a cat, a mouse, a snake, a fish, a worm, a butterfly, etc. The tearing pain made Hong Xiao feel suffocated, and she felt that she was about to be engulfed by a vortex formed by a huge airflow. Dizziness. Seeing that she was about to lose consciousness, her body sank, and the pressure suddenly disappeared miraculously, but she felt that her whole body was sinking rapidly. Then, she felt her whole body inexplicably getting hotter and hotter, until she felt as if her whole body was thrown into a furnace and was constantly burning. Her consciousness became increasingly blurred, she was exhausted, and finally had to give up struggling, and then she lost consciousness. Chapter 236, The War Among the Princes. Let's pull the screen back to the ant world again. It is said that the commander-in-chief of the occupation forces of the Japanese Blue Ant Empire, Bang Jepai, relied on the stink bug bomber in his hand to explode his big stinky fart super poison gas bomb everywhere, and he was aggressive and arrogant everywhere, making the various ant countries humiliated and ashamed to see people. Soon, the Japanese Blue Ant Empire transported another 3,000 stink bug bombers and 1,000 beetle fighters from the country, plus Bang Jepai had also desperately collected 2,500 beetles in the small woods in the northeast region, an important resource area for beetles. In this way, Bang Jepai has 8,000 stink bug bombers and 3,500 beetle fighters, which is enough to look down on the vassal states. At this time, he can beat anyone he doesn't like. No, it should be, whoever he doesn't like, he will explode a big stinky fart to smoke the drug to death. When they found that the monkey ants were preparing for invasion, they sent thousands of stink bug bombers under the escort of 3,000 beetle fighters to fart on their behalf in monkey ants, killing millions of monkey ants and scaring monkey ants so much that they dared not act rashly again. When they found that the Xiongnu ant army was trying to escape to the northwest, they sent stink bugs to fart on their behalf again, killing countless Xiongnu ant soldiers. It was simply too domineering, too lawless, too inhumane and cruel. Not allowing them to attack was understandable, but now they are not even allowed to escape, which is really outrageous. Just when Bang Jepai was rampant and overbearing, God finally couldn't stand it anymore. Half a month later, in the ruling area of the Japanese Blue Ant Empire, there came an unprecedented Great Plague. This Great Plague was mainly aimed at these notorious stink bugs, caused by the infection of bacteria on their dirty bodies, which almost wiped out this group of arrogant stink bug bombers, killing most of them, leaving only more than 1,000. Moreover, more than half of its beetle fighters were also lost, which made Bang Jepai heartbroken and depressed, and he dared not fart recklessly anymore. Of course, other vassal states would not miss such a once-in-a-lifetime counterattack opportunity. The White Hungarian coalition transferred 2 million ant troops from the country to join forces with the 5 million ant troops of the Monkey Kingdom to launch a counterattack against the Japanese Blue Empire. In addition, the most crucial thing is that the 5,000 scarab fighters of the old white ant commander Kisini have joined, which is the confidence of this counterattack. Obviously, Not Awake and Kisini have put aside their past grudges and reached a reconciliation. Not Awake also appointed Kisini as the commander-in-chief of the White Hungarian Coalition Air Force, with the power to freely mobilize the Air Force, Scarab fighters. In fact, Kisini doesn't care whether Not Awake gives him an official title or not. The key is that it has actually completely mastered this Air Force. Now not awake is begging him, not the other way around. Therefore, for the sake of the Empire's counterattack, not awake has to bow his head and beg Kisini, so appointing Kisini as the commander-in-chief of the coalition air force is also a way of currying favor. This is a ready-made hat that doesn't cost a penny, so why not give it? Angry you to death agreed to not awake's request, and there are 3 benefits. First, it can make his own troops legal and legitimate, and some things will be much easier to handle. Second, only through a few decent actual combat can the combat effectiveness of the Air Force in his hands be tested. Third, the Walan Empire is now everyone's public enemy, and the stink bug bomber is too threatening to everyone. It is good for everyone to take the opportunity to destroy it. In this way, the 2 sides hit it off and quickly formulated the time, place and combat plan of the attack. At about 6 o'clock in the morning of a certain day in early July, the sun had just appeared, and the Walan Empire occupied the airfield of the stink bug bomber. Suddenly, a large group of beetles appeared from the western horizon, and they swooped down on the airfield. Because the Walan country's airbase had neither radar warning like humans nor fighter planes patrolling in the air. Therefore, the base service personnel and pilots were caught off guard. At this time, the stink bug bomber on the airport was still lingering in a gentle dream and was reluctant to leave. In a blink of an eye, this large group of beetle fighters flew over the heads of the stink bug bombers. The pissed off aircraft artillery ants mercilessly fired formic acid bombs, and the bombs poured down on these lazy stink bugs like a downpour. These popular stink bug bombers melted like wax figures in an instant, turning into a pool of sewage and left on the ground. The nuclear weapons that Bang Jepai relied on were all gone. Then, the beetles went to find the beetles of Bang Jepai to settle accounts and began to kill each other. At this moment, there were only more than 1,400 beetle fighters left in the country of Walan. They understood that the one who came was not kind and knew that they could not defeat the enemy, so they hurriedly fled to the east, that is, the homeland of Walan. The air force of the White Hungarian coalition, the beetle fighters followed closely behind them. Soon, in less than half a day, they caught up and shot them all down or killed them on the ground. The Kisini Air Force fighters won a great victory, with only 53 losses. Most of the lost beetle fighters were because they drank too much water in the morning and were too excited to pee in time, causing their bladders to explode, and they were suffocated to death. No mistake, 1 song, 1 post, 1 content, 1 6, 1 9, 1 book, 1 bar. Next, the Kisini Air Force began to wreak havoc and ravage the Japanese Empire's occupation forces, and the Bang Jepai fart soldiers were scared to death, farting and urinating. Unfortunately, Bang Jepai can no longer release a big stinky fart that can suffocate people to death, and can no longer be arrogant. Now Bang Jepai is afraid that others will fart on its head. However, the enemy's beetle planes can't fart, but they can pee, because now they are like Bing, firing formic acid rain at the Japanese fart soldiers running around on the ground. After being severely bullied by the Kisini Air Force, the Japanese Empire's occupation forces suffered heavy losses and their morale plummeted. Although the killing power of the scarab beetle is far less than that of the stink bug bomber, it is still not afraid of hard work and tirelessly loads and bombs back and forth. Although it only destroyed less than 1/3 of the Bang Jepai troops, it caused the enemy's morale to collapse and achieve the intended purpose. The day after the bombing, the Vietnamese monkey ant army and the White Hungarian allied forces began to attack the Bang Jepai occupation forces from the north and south according to the pre-war agreement. At this time, Bang Jepai suddenly felt that the end was coming. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 237, The Three Kingdoms Alliance. Sure enough, the revenge armies of the Three Kingdoms were full of high morale and indignation, and soon, they swept through the Japanese soldiers like autumn wind sweeping fallen leaves. At this moment, the Japanese soldiers with low morale were too cowardly, and they were useless. When they saw the enemy, they did not dare to resist at all. They always ran away desperately, and kneeled down to surrender if they could not run faster. It was really one person surrenders, the whole family is lucky. In less than 10 days, the three-nation coalition forces successfully joined forces in the Kyoto area of the former Red Ant Empire. Unexpectedly, after the victory, the leaders of the three-nation coalition forces will face a lot of headaches, such as how to resettle more than 3 million Japanese prisoners, how to divide the territory of the former Red Ant Empire, how to treat the Japanese Empire, whether to continue to attack and destroy it, or to repair relations and live in peace with it, as well as the resettlement of refugees and the wounded and sick of the three countries, as well as food and grass. In addition, there are problems such as post-war reconstruction. Meals must be eaten bite by bite, and problems must naturally be solved one by one. First, the issue of resettling 3 million captives from the Japanese Empire is easy to deal with. Since the White and Hun countries have a small population and are in need of a large number of laborers, these Japanese soldiers can be sent to the two countries to serve as laborers. If they do a good job, they can be restored to their official resident status. This is better than treating them as farts. Therefore, the White Termite Federation obtained 1.8 million captive soldiers, and the Hun Ant Federation obtained about 1.2 million. Secondly, regarding the division of the occupied territory, the White Termite Federation received 40%, the Hun Ant Federation 30%, and the U-Monkey Ant Kingdom 30%. However, the good places were occupied by the White and Hun countries, and the U-Monkey Ant Kingdom got the poorer places that others didn't want. Thirdly, regarding the issue of continuing to attack the Japanese Empire, the three countries had differences. The White Termite Kingdom was the most active, the Hun Ant Kingdom was reluctant, and the U-Monkey Ant Kingdom was unwilling. The reason why the White Termite Kingdom was the most active was of course because it believed that the Japanese Empire was the roadblock and the biggest obstacle that currently prevented it from dominating the ant world. The Xiongnu Ant Kingdom thought it didn't matter. Anyway, they were just working hard for the White Termite Kingdom. They did whatever their master asked them to do. They didn't have any ideas. As for the Yuhao Ant Kingdom, it felt very aggrieved. The hard work it sold was not proportional to its income. Therefore, it had no hope for the next joint action, so it seemed very passive and couldn't get motivated. But the leader of the White Termite Kingdom and the commander-in-chief of the Three Kingdoms Alliance, Not Awake, didn't care so much. As long as no one opposed it, he would forcefully promote the implementation of his grand plan. Not Awake, do you really think that the soldiers of other countries will love to listen to you so much, and they will be your people in life and your ghosts in death? It seems that you are still not awake. Do you think it is so easy to take someone else's life? Won't they fight you to death? Even if you are very powerful, don't be so arrogant, okay? In fact, the Air Force Commander Ki-Si-Ni sees this problem very clearly, but he just won't say anything, let alone stop it. What can you do to him? He has his own plans. He has been depressed for such a long time, and he is frustrated enough. It's time for him to have a chance to come to the stage. You can't slander him for being ambitious. Didn't Napoleon say, a soldier who doesn't want to be a marshal is not a good soldier? What's more, Ki-Si-Ni is now the Air Force commander, and he just wants to go one step further. This Ki-Si-Ni won't really make you angry to death, right? Don't be angry. Of course, this is not for your brother, you are a human, not an ant. This is naturally said to the White Ant leader Not Awake. Because, this is called the mantis preys on the aureole behind, the good show is yet to come. Another month has passed, time flies. On the morning of August 5th, Wishing-Sing woke up from his sleep and packed up his things to leave. He thought he had already arranged all the miscellaneous things. At this time, the orderly ran in hurriedly, holding a dead fly in his hands. He panted and shook his antennae and said, Commander-in-Chief, good morning. Not Awake waved his antennae and said unhappily, how many times have I told you, don't call me Commander-in-Chief, call me Commander-in-Chief. I am the Commander-in-Chief of the Three Kingdoms Allied Forces. The Commander-in-Chief of the Red Ant Army was beaten to pulp by us and fled into the mountains and forests to become a savage. The name Commander-in-Chief is unlucky and will lead to defeat. The orderly shook his antennae and said, Commander-in-Chief, this is it. I heard that the country of Wolin is very poor, and there is often famine and no food. Look, I brought you high-quality food, a dead fly. I tied it to you with spider silk, and you can take a bite at any time when you feel hungry. Not Awake waved his antennae happily and said, Great. You are too loyal to me. I will promote you. From now on, you will be my chief guard. The orderly shook his antennae and said modestly, Commander-in-Chief, I have no interest in being an official or not. I only know how to do my job well. After that, he carefully tied the dead fly in his hand to the back of Not Awake with spider silk. At this moment, The commander-in-chief of the coalition forces, not awake, who was carrying a dead flyer on his back, did not look like a commander-in-chief commanding thousands of troops to fight, but rather like a refugee fleeing from a distant place. However, not awake looked nonchalant. Eating was more important to him than manners. Otherwise, how could he be greedy and sleepy and always look not awake? This is the origin of the nickname not awake. As for its real name, everyone has long forgotten it. It is precisely because not awake and Zhu Wunang are as fat that they have similar tastes and get along very well. They are just short of wearing the same pair of pants, if they need to wear pants. No mistake, a post, a content, a book, a forum. I almost forgot that they are not even wearing underpants now, and they are naked on the battlefield. Have you ever seen an ant wearing underpants? No, that's right. Now the commander of the three-nation coalition forces, not awake, has everything ready and thought of everything, but he forgot to wear underpants. No, he doesn't want to wear them at all. This shameless guy plans to lead a large group of shameless guys to attack another group of more shameless guys. In fact, this is a shameless war. Now it depends on who is more shameless and who has a thicker skin and who will win the final victory. As if to prove his shamelessness, a few days before the army set out, not awake asked I'll kill you to send the Beetle bomber to bomb the important targets of the Japanese Empire, military towns, food warehouses, military assembly areas, military and political headquarters and military fortresses, etc. Chapter 238, Falling into Trap. Angry U-Beetle fighter plane patrolled the Wallen Empire and basically found no traces of ants, nor any obvious military targets. It is estimated that the enemy had long expected that the three-nation coalition would send Beetle bombers to bomb, and had already prepared to hide all important targets, and all the Wallen soldiers were hiding in the tunnels. So, Angry U had turned it hastily and came back to report to Not Awake, saying that the soldiers and civilians of Wallen were afraid of Not Awake's reputation, and they all hid in the tunnels and dared not come out. They didn't have much food and grass, and it was estimated that they would starve to death soon. Not Awake was very happy when he heard it, and immediately ordered the three-nation coalition to speed up and defeat the enemy completely while the enemy's morale was low and food and grass were insufficient. Look, this Not Awake is really not awake. How brainless, doesn't it know that this is the enemy's plan to lure the enemy deep into the depths? Yes, it really doesn't know, because he climbed to the high position of the commander-in-chief of the three armed forces through nepotism. He is the most trusted favorite of the Queen of the Termite Federation, or to put it bluntly, the male imperial concubine. Do you understand? This male imperial concubine seems to be different from the Yang Feifei. You must say, isn't this nonsense? Can they be the same? First of all, the species are different, one is an ant and the other is a human. Secondly, the gender is also different, one is male, and the other is female, let alone other differences in interests, education, personality, emotional intelligence, and IQ. On the contrary, what I want to talk about today is not the differences between the two, but the similarities. First of all, they are both imperial concubines with the same title. Secondly, they are both chubby and can eat and sleep. Thirdly, they are both characters who are extremely favored by the head of state, the queen and the emperor, that is, they are very popular. In addition, this male imperial concubine, like Yang Feifei, has no military talent. However, Yang Feifei knew her own limitations and never led troops to fight, but you, the male imperial concubine Mei Shuxing, wanted to pretend to be a hero and show off. Don't you know that military affairs are not a joke? What kind of prestige are you showing off? If Qi Xini hadn't helped you in the previous victory, could you have won? This time, Qi Xini couldn't help you even if he wanted to, because the enemy hid in the cave and couldn't be bombed. What's more, this time Qi Xini really doesn't want to help you anymore, so just wait to cry to death. Sure enough, things were just as Qi Xini expected. After entering the Wallan Empire, the enemy adopted the tactic of fortifying the walls and clearing the fields, so that the three-nation coalition led by Mei Shuxing could not get a single grain of food. The daily consumption of food and grass for these millions of troops was extremely high, and in less than half a month, the food and grass were exhausted. At this time, the dead fly on the back of Not Awake had been eaten up by itself, and it had also eaten a lot of other things, such as mosquitoes, dead grasshoppers and dead moths. Now it had no choice but to eat tree bark and grass roots like everyone else. Not Awake cursed in his heart. This country of Wallen is so stingy. They knew I would come, But they didn't leave me any delicious food. Oh. No, I'm not here to be a guest, I'm here to fight them. Naturally, they won't look at me well. Hey. Why should I fight them? Isn't it good to live in peace? Yes. Am I a little stupid? I came all the way here to suffer this kind of hardship. Thinking back to the past, I was so comfortable eating delicious food and drinking spicy drinks in the Queen's palace. Why did I come here to suffer this kind of foreign torture? Am I really crazy? Hey. It's all because of this useless reputation. What the commander-in-chief of the 3 armies, what the hero of troubled times, are all useless things that are not worth eating or drinking. Now, Not Awake is sighing and complaining. He regrets now, not just ordinary regret, but special regret. His intestines are green with regret. He is afraid that he will die here. First of all, the monkey ants all quietly withdrew to their hometown without a single word last night. Secondly, today, it was discovered that there were many deserters among the Xiongnu ants. Although no deserters have been found among the white termites so far, the voices of complaints are endless. Almost all of them are complaining. It is better to evacuate quickly. This is not a place for people to stay. Otherwise, there is a possibility of mutiny in the whole army at any time. Thinking of this, the commander of the coalition forces Not Awake hurriedly ordered the whole army to retreat. Soon, the white Xiongnu coalition forces, with low morale and no fighting spirit, came to a large canyon in the territory of Wolin. Everyone was really tired and hungry and couldn't walk anymore, so they prepared to rest here for a while before leaving, so the team stopped here and planned to camp. Suddenly, like a magician's magic trick, countless soldiers of the Wolin Empire emerged from the ground around the canyon. They seemed to have been waiting for the White Hungarian Allied forces for a long time. No mistake. Facing an enemy army with absolute advantages in terms of time, place and people, how can this war be fought? Fearing death and cherishing life and starving to death, Not Awake announced without hesitation that the whole army raised his hands to surrender. In the blink of an eye, the more than 3 million White Hungarian Allied forces all became prisoners of the Wolin Empire. It's really the wind and water turn. The Wolin Empire, which had just suffered a great defeat, lost millions of troops and lost the territory of the former Red Ant Empire, won another great victory in a blink of an eye. The Wolin Empire was immediately jubilant, and the whole country celebrated together, and there was a sea of joy everywhere. These brown ants came out of the tunnels one after another, singing and dancing everywhere, but they like fan dance, holding small fans in their hands and shaking their butts everywhere. Nowadays, a very troublesome and thorny problem is placed in front of the Japanese Prime Minister Chi Jepai and the cabinet ministers. Since the former Prime Minister Ku Dupai stepped down, the current Prime Minister Chi Jepai has been in power. Chi Jepai's ability is not much different from Ku Dupai, but he is a little impatient and not as sophisticated and experienced as Ku Dupai. Because Chi Jepai is too impatient, he often either gets the cold shoulder or eats other people's farts and is deceived by them. Right now, he is worried about the handling of these 3 million enemy prisoners of war. It would be simple to kill them all, and he could also vent his anger for the defeat in the last war, but there would be no practical benefits. What about releasing them all, and waiting for these prisoners to go back and eat and drink enough, and then come back to beat him? He is not that stupid. Chapter 239 Dealing with Prisoners of War. This Chi Jepai is not Zhuge Liang of the past, who understands the principle of 7 captures and 7 releases. It only knows how to eat other people's stinky farts, and has not tasted other people's fragrant farts. Since these prisoners of war cannot be released, there is no benefit in killing them. What should be done? Yes, take these prisoners of war to negotiate with the current acting commander of the White Hun Coalition Qi Si to see if you can get some benefits. At this time, the acting commander Qi Si has naturally controlled the entire White Hun Coalition with his own strength, experience and prestige, and the word acting could have been removed long ago. It turned out that before Mei Shuizing led the 3-country coalition to attack the Walan Kingdom, he still left 500,000 troops in the occupied area, including 200,000 white termite troops and 300,000 Xiongnu ant troops, and entrusted Qi Si to temporarily manage these garrisons on his behalf. However, Chi Jepai never expected that he would be deceived by Qi Si, a guy who is more cunning than a fox, even if he had 10 heads. It seems that the Prime Minister of the Walan Kingdom, Eat Fart, is going to start eating farts again, and he may have to eat a series of big stinky farts. Since Prime Minister Eat Fart wants to eat farts and likes to eat farts, let him eat them. So, the cabinet ministers and the king's big stomach agreed with Eat Fart's idea and asked him to send a special envoy to negotiate with Kisini in order to get as many benefits as possible for the Wallen Empire. Unexpectedly, the special envoy sent by Eat Fart to negotiate with Kisini was Bai Jepai. Don't underestimate Bai Jepai. It is the most trusted housekeeper of the palace of the big stomach. It is cunning and very good at doing things. Naturally, it has also gained a lot of benefits for itself. As the saying goes, take care of both public and private interests, and do not delay either. It seems that sending Bai Jepai as a negotiating representative seems to be a good idea. 10 days later, the Wallen Kingdom Special Envoy Bujipi, who was entrusted by the Big Eater and Prime Minister Chajipi, led a large negotiation delegation and finally resisted the capital of the former Red Ant Empire, Kyoto City-State, and began to meet with Kisini to negotiate about prisoners of war and other interest exchanges. The shrewd Kisini warmly received the Wallen Kingdom's negotiation delegation led by Bujipi and entertained all the guests very thoughtfully. This made Bujipi and other negotiators overjoyed and flattered, feeling that this meeting would definitely be fruitful and worthwhile. Sure enough, when Bujipi and other representatives put forward a very absurd and unreasonable request to exchange prisoners of war for the occupied areas they had lost, Kisini did not immediately express opposition, but said that it could be considered. This made Bujipi and other negotiators suddenly pleasantly surprised, feeling that it was as unreal as a dream, so they hurriedly discussed the specific requirements and related matters in private. In fact, all this was within the expectations of Kisini. Now it is going to set up a big scam and set up an attractive bait to make the fish take the bait. Compared with the three major countries, the Red Ant Kingdom, the U-Monkey Kingdom and the Wallan Kingdom, the population of the White Hungarians is too small and the labor force is extremely scarce. Therefore, these 3 million prisoners of war are too important to them. They are veterans who have been through many battles and are the most qualified combat power. They are simply treasures. Of course, Kisini is reluctant to give them up. On the contrary, the place where Kisini now occupies is the territory of another country. It doesn't matter to him. He just values the important strategic resource here, the place where the beetles are produced. As long as he has the means to get the beetles, this place can also be given up. Similarly, the Wallan Kingdom also covets the resources of the beetle production area. Otherwise, why would they send such a large negotiation delegation here with so much effort? In this way, both sides know the purpose of the other side, and they are all blind people eating dumplings. The negotiating envoy of the Wallan Kingdom, Jepai, knew very well that these 3 million prisoners of war were very important to the sparsely populated White and Hungarian countries, and the scarab beetle production area was even more important to the Wallan Kingdom, so it would spare no effort to get the scarab beetle production area. Soon, it proposed to release the prisoners of war in batches and at different times in exchange for the land it wanted, that is, the specific method of exchanging prisoners of war for land. Kisini also accepted the method of Jepai very readily, but he disagreed with Jepai on time, quantity and land. This made Jepai very anxious. He couldn't just watch the duck in his mouth fly away, right? Jepai first offered a very high price. It proposed to release these 3 million prisoners of war in 3 times. This year, 1 million would be released to exchange for the most important scarab beetle production area. Next year, another 1 million would be released to exchange for half of the remaining land, and the year after, another 1 million would be released to exchange for the other half of the remaining land. Obviously, this exchange method is very beneficial to Bujipi, but very disadvantageous to Kisini. Sure enough, Bujipi's wishful exchange method was rejected by Kisini. The first round of negotiations failed. No mistakes, 1 post, 1 content, 1 6, 1 9, 1 book, 1 bar. Then, the second round of negotiations began. This time, it was Kisini who made the request. He said that he wanted to exchange all the prisoners of war and territory at once. This time, the Wallan country's negotiation delegation was immediately furious. They didn't react for a while and didn't believe it was true. They felt that the matter was too easy to solve. Instead, they thought that Kisini was setting a trap for them and didn't dare to drill into it. Kisini was not afraid that Bujipi would not drill into his trap, because the temptation of the important production area of the beetle resources was too great. They had to drill into this trap, but they drilled it with trembling and half-belief. Although Bujipi was very satisfied with Kisini's proposal, it did not dare to accept it completely. It was afraid that Kisini would change his mind halfway. What if you released all the prisoners of war and Kisini did not hand over the territory? So, the cunning Bujipi began to slowly lower his price, still insisting on the last point of view, but shorten the time to once every 6 months. Obviously, this idea was still rejected by Kisini. When Bujipi shortened the time to once every 3 months, Kisini proposed to agree to a maximum of 2 exchanges. Bujipi hurriedly discussed with several important members of the delegation. After repeated discussions and research, he finally agreed to Kisini's proposal. Next, it was about the number of prisoners of war exchanged, the time and place, and what land to exchange. After several rounds of negotiations, the two sides finally reached an agreement to exchange prisoners of war for land. Chapter 240, full of schemes. Both sides were quite satisfied, and everyone was happy. The specific exchange measures were as follows. The Wallan Kingdom released 800,000 termites and 1.2 million Xiongyu ant prisoners of war in exchange for 70% of the land in the occupied area, including the important resource production area of the scarab beetle. The remaining 200,000 termites and 800,000 Xiongyu ants were exchanged for the remaining land 2 months later. Not Awakened Pig and Competent were both on the list of the second batch of personnel to be exchanged. In mid-September, the Wallan Kingdom sent another 8 million new Fart soldiers, led by its commander Tailbone and director Hold Fart, and escorted 2 million White and Hungarian coalition prisoners of war to the place agreed upon by Kisini and Hold Fart for the formal handover. It seemed that everything was going very smoothly. Unexpectedly, the U-Monkey Ant Kingdom was very dissatisfied after learning about this. Although the first exchange was carried out on the territories of the White and Hungarian countries, it could still turn a blind eye, but the second exchange included the land that the U-Monkey Ants had obtained after the last war. This information was obtained by the U-Monkey Ant Kingdom spies recently. Of course, even if no one was sent to inquire, it would naturally know 2 months later when the Japanese Blue Ant Army came to take over the territory. Now that it knows it in advance, it still makes it very angry. This is mainly because there are no prisoners of war from the U-Monkey Ant Kingdom in this war. Their U-Monkey Ant soldiers escaped in advance and were not caught by the enemy. Therefore, they did not feel the pain and could not feel the pain of the White Hungarians. Therefore, whether the White Hungarians and the Japanese Blue Kingdom exchange or not actually has nothing to do with the U-Monkey Ant Kingdom, as long as they do not touch the land it occupies. However, if the Japanese Blue Kingdom dares to send troops to take over its occupied land, it will regard it as an invasion and will not be polite. In addition, the commander of the new army of the Japanese Blue Empire, Tailbone, was so excited that he could not sleep after receiving the source of the scarab resources. The next day, just after dawn, he got up from the bed, ate breakfast in a hurry, and led the army to the place where the scarabs appeared most, the Mankao forest. Suddenly, the scene in front of him shocked him so much that he was stunned, his whole body was cold, and even his blood almost coagulated. It turned out that Kisini, who was more cunning than a fox, had fooled Holding Fart again. He had a premonition that land would be exchanged for prisoners of war before the negotiating representatives of the Wallan Kingdom came after the defeat of Not Wake Up, so he immediately ordered to set fire to all the scarab production areas and drive the scarabs to other places to prevent the Wallan Empire's conspiracy from succeeding. He had sent troops to catch almost all the scarabs at the beginning of occupying the scarab production areas, and autumn is the season when scarabs are abundant. After his large-scale capture, he now has 9,500 scarab fighters, which can almost despise the various princes and ant countries. Looking at the scarab beetle producing area that had been burnt to ruins by the fire, the exasperated Tailbone wanted to strangle the hateful Kisini to death. Kisini, you dog, you really pissed me off. Tailbone hurriedly reported the bad news to the exchange director Bujpai, who had not yet returned to China. After Bujpai knew it, he was so angry that he almost had a stroke and fainted on the spot. After the emergency rescue by the accompanying doctor named Yijepai, he finally woke up. The real name of this accompanying doctor is not Yijepai. In fact, his medical skills in the country of Wallan are also first class, but despite this, compared with human medical skills, they are far, far behind. Therefore, he often encounters seriously ill patients who cannot be treated, and angrily curses Yijepai and turns away. Over time, This became its catchphrase, so the families of patients who were refused treatment by it stopped calling it by its real name and called it Yi Jepai. Now, after being saved by Yi Jepai, Bu Jepai knew that it was useless to be angry, so he had to find Qi Si Ni to settle accounts and ask why it did this. In this way, Bu Jepai was full of anger and ran to the White Hungarian Allied Forces headquarters to ask Qi Si Ni, "Why did you set fire to the beetle production area and what was your intention?" Unexpectedly, the adjutant of Qi Si Ni said that the commander had gone out hunting and had not returned yet, so he asked Bu Jepai to come back in a few days. Bu Jepai asked the adjutant when Qi Si Ni would come back. The adjutant replied that he would come back in 2 or 3 days at the least, and 4 or 5 days at the most. Bu Jepai said stubbornly, "Okay, I'll wait for him here." The adjutant replied that the commander knew you would come and had prepared a good place for you. "Please follow me." Bu Jepai was shocked and thought, "This Kissini is too powerful. He actually predicted that I would come. It seems that I still underestimated it." Bu Jepai was taken to a very luxurious hotel room by Kissini. What surprised it was that there were many rare treasures in this room, which it had never seen before, and some of them it even loved. Many of the treasures in this room were obtained by the rich termite merchants in the west and north, as well as the Ant Federation farther away. Naturally, for the housekeeper of the royal palace of the Wallen Kingdom, they are very rare. Although Bu Jepai himself is also a big collector, these treasures are still deeply loved by Bu Jepai. In fact, the treasures in this room are the personal belongings of Awakens, the former commander of the White Hungarian Coalition forces. Now Kissini is just borrowing flowers to offer to Buddha. No mistakes in one song, one post, one content, one book, one forum, 1619, one book, one forum. Take a look. Qi Si Ni wanted to appease and bribe Bu Jepai, at least to paralyze the other party and let the Japanese Blue Ant Army relax their vigilance against him. As a collector of toys, Bu Jepai was so surprised that he was immersed in these colorful toys and had no concept of time. It was not until after dark that Bu Jepai felt hungry. At this time, a very sumptuous dinner was pushed in front of him by the waiter. Suddenly, the room gradually lit up. It turned out that the adjutant of Qi Si Ni brought a night shining pearl to Bu Jepai. Bu Jepai was shocked. He had only heard of this night shining pearl but had never seen it. Now the real thing appeared in front of him. How could he not be surprised? He was simply stunned. He couldn't help but think that Qi Si Ni's reception standard was too excessive, and whether there was any ulterior motive? Could it be that Qi Si Ni wanted to get important military intelligence from me and ask me to be a traitor? This is absolutely not possible. I will never agree to it. Thinking of this, the uneasy mood in my heart was slightly relieved. Chapter 241 Another clever move. So, Bu Jepai sat down and had a meal. It was very satisfied with the dinner, but it was even more satisfied with the furnishings in this room. With the help of the dim illumination of the night pearl, Bu Jepai carefully admired the treasures in the room after dinner. In this way, Bu Jepai stayed in this room for 5 days without realizing it, and almost forgot what it was doing. On the morning of the 6th day, the adjutant came to say that the commander had returned and wanted to invite Bu Jepai the director. Kissini still received Bu Jepai warmly as before, and asked it if it was okay living here in recent days. Is there anything unsatisfactory? Bu Jepai hurriedly said that it was very good, it was okay, and it was quite satisfied. He also asked where those treasures came from. Kissini said that a friend of his asked him to keep them. If Bu Jepai liked any treasure, he could go and ask for Bu Jepai to see if his friend could bear to give it up. However, these things are not cheap. Qi Si Ni said this, which made him feel very embarrassed. When Qi Si Ni asked him if there was anything else, Bu Jepai just remembered that he almost forgot the main thing. At this time, the anger that Bu Jepai had been holding back had long gone. He asked Qi Si Ni in a resentful tone like a resentful woman, "Why did your army burn the forest where the beetles were produced? Isn't this an act of violating the exchange agreement?" Qi Si Ni said, "So you came here for this matter. I am investigating this arson case. It has been found that a border patrol team used fire to barbecue their meals by the forest and did not completely extinguish the remaining fire. When the wind blew, the sparks ignited the surrounding hay and dead leaves, causing the forest fire. Now those suspects are aware of their grave sins and are on the run. I am sending troops to hunt them down. Please rest assured that after catching them, I will definitely hand them over to you for processing." Only at this time did Bu Jepai realize how powerful Qi Si Ni was. He said everything so perfectly that you could not catch his braid at all. Now Bijepai can only smile bitterly, a smile that is uglier than crying. When Bijepai told Tailbone the answer, "I'm so angry," Tailbone was so angry that he wanted to cry. He lamented, "We were all deceived by this old fox, and he was deceived miserably." His heart was bleeding because of the pain of losing so many beetles. At this time, Bijepai's mind was full of the treasures in the room that made you so angry. He didn't think about the beetles at all now. It was useless to think about them. They had been burned down by a big fire. Who would you ask for the account? He thought to himself, what is my favorite treasure? Night pearl, catstone, sea rice stone, or... 2 days later, border guards from all over the country reported to Tailbone, there was no trace of the White and Hungarian armies on almost all borders. I don't know where they went. The commander of the Japanese Empire's occupation forces, Tailbone, felt relieved and relaxed. He was no longer so concerned about stepping up the construction of fortifications and digging tunnels. 5 days later, in the early morning, countless beetle bombers suddenly appeared in the northern sky and began to fiercely bomb important strategic locations of the Japanese Empire's occupation forces, such as food warehouses, command agencies, key intersections and barracks. At the same time, millions of white ant soldiers emerged from the woods and grass in the east, north and west. The south is the territory of the monkey ants, cutting off the hope of the Japanese Empire's soldiers to escape. The Japanese Empire's occupation forces were in chaos, defeated and scattered. These newly recruited Japanese soldiers had not had time to undergo systematic training, had not fought any battles, and had extremely poor combat effectiveness. What's worse is that their commanders, including the commander of the occupation forces, Tailbone, never dreamed that bad luck would come so quickly. They had no time to prepare before the war broke out. When Coccyx woke up from his sleep, emergency reports from all over the country came in like snowflakes, frightening him to the point of being at a loss as to what to do. He could only curse "I'm so angry" as a bastard, hold your fart as an idiot, eat your fart as a fool, and himself as a donkey. In short, he cursed everything he should curse. However, the war situation did not improve at all, but got worse and worse. At this time, the White Hungarian coalition forces had seized important strongholds under the cover of the Scarab bombers, and began to conduct psychological warfare, shouting at those stubborn Japanese soldiers, urging them to surrender and promising them all kinds of benefits. In the face of strong military pressure and the temptation of interests, the demoralized soldiers of the Japanese Empire raised their hands and surrendered wisely. Batches of Japanese prisoners came out of the holes that had not been dug yet and accepted the surrender of the White Hungarian coalition forces. Soon, the Kisini troops attacked the headquarters of the Japanese Empire's occupation forces, and the Tailbone had to surrender obediently. In this way, in less than a week, the White Hungarian coalition forces reoccupied the land that had been sold, eliminated 1.8 million enemy troops, and captured 6.2 million enemy troops. No mistake. 1 post, 1 content, 1 6, 1 9, 1 book, 1 bar. Obviously, this is another shameless war, and the most shameless Kisini won the final victory. When the news of the defeat of the Wallen Empire reached the country, the whole country was shocked and indignant. People all over the country cursed the White and Hungarian countries for being treacherous, shameless, dirty and worse than shit. They demanded that the remaining 1 million prisoners of war be killed as sacrifices to relieve their anger. After hearing the news, Sleepy and Pig Incompetent in the prisoner of war camp rolled their eyes and fainted on the ground. There were also many angry young people in Wallen who demanded that the traitors be found, arrested and paraded through the streets for criticism, and preferably all the property be confiscated before being killed. After hearing this, the brothers Edefard and Holdefart were so scared that they broke out in cold sweats and could not help but curse the bastard Kisini. Kisini, Kisini. You bastard. Your conscience is very bad. Your undeclared war is a naked challenge to our great Wallen Empire and a serious violation of the rules of the game. We will severely punish you, and punish you so much that you will lose everything and have no choice but to jump into the river. The two brothers, who were frightened and angry, did not expect to be summoned by His Majesty the King, the Big Stomach King, the next day. The Big Stomach King said that the incident had caused public outrage and it was difficult to suppress it. In particular, the number of Wallen soldiers captured by the enemy this time accounted for 30% of the total number, including the children of the middle class, and he was not easy to explain. Chapter 242, Arrogant soldiers must be defeated. Therefore, the Big Stomach King considered sending Bering Fart as a special envoy to negotiate with Kisini, asking him to use the last 1 million white Hungarian prisoners of war in the hands of the Wollin Kingdom as a bargaining chip to exchange as many Wollin Kingdom Fart soldiers as possible, preferably including all the middle-class children of about 500,000. The Big Stomach King also asked Eat Fart to lead all cabinet ministers to find ways to appease the emotions of the people across the country and suppress individual troublemakers who took the lead in making trouble. Bering Fart and Eat Fart, the two brothers in distress, had to accept these two difficult tasks. This time, Bering Fart really became a real Bering Fart. He had to hold back his anger, and his farts, and he couldn't just let them out. Especially in front of the cunning and scheming devil Kisini, you have to hold back, smile, and try every means to please him, otherwise, it may be difficult to complete the arduous task of holding Fart given to it by the Big Stomach King. Thinking about this, holding Fart feels aggrieved and uncomfortable, and feels angry. What is this? We are completely led by the nose by this Kisini and played around by him. Alice. There is no way, he is smarter than you, he is more skilled, you can't refuse to accept it. With this mood of having to admit defeat, Holding Fart returned home dejectedly, preparing to negotiate the relevant matters again. Holding Fart negotiated with Kisini again with a very complicated mood. Unlike last time, this time it already knew the power of Kisini, and did not dare to ask for too high a price at the beginning, but only asked to exchange the 1 million prisoners of war in the hands of Kisini for the 3 million prisoners of war in the hands of Kisini. Kisini had achieved his goal, and he didn't want to be too pitiful. Finally, he agreed to exchange the 2 million prisoners of war in his hands, including the 500,000 middle-class children, for all the remaining 1 million white Hungarian prisoners of war in the hands of the Wallan Kingdom. At this point, the negotiations on prisoners of war between the White Hungarians and the Wallan Kingdom ended, and the remaining 4.2 million Wallan soldiers were sent to the Termite Federation as trophies for use as labor. The Termite Kingdom suddenly gained so much labor, and the whole country was boiling, and the people were excited. Not only that, Kisini also saved all the soldiers of the White Hungarians, and his reputation rose immediately and became a household name. Her Majesty the Queen of the Termite Federation Empire was very pleased, and immediately appointed Kisini as the commander-in-chief of the 3 armed forces of the country, allowing him to take power again, and also conferred him the title of Duke Kiwi, making him unlimited and unparalleled. The 2 pigs, not awakened pig incompetent, returned to their home countries in dejection and disgrace. They were demoted to commoners by the monarchs of the 2 countries and were buried in the dust of ant history. In addition to the Wallan Kingdom, there is another ant country that feels very aggrieved, that is the Yuhao Ant Kingdom. Seeing that Angry You to Death is performing a big show in the front stage, but it has nothing to do, the Yuhao Ant Kingdom, hiding in the corner of the south, feels really bad. However, it can't beat Angry You to Death, and there is nothing to gain by going to trouble the Wallan Kingdom, because it has plenty of labor. The only thing it can do now is to wait patiently, waiting for an opportunity to take advantage of the fire and fish in troubled waters. Unexpectedly, this opportunity came soon. After entering October, the weather is clear and bright, with abundant fruits and food. It is the busiest season for ants, and it is also the golden season for the ant kingdoms to stop fighting, recuperate, and store food for the winter. At this time, only fools would go to war. Do you want to starve to death without food in the winter? Therefore, this is also the time when the defense of each ant kingdom is the most lax. The White Hun Coalition Army, which is Pistatu, is no exception. They also need to eat and prepare food for the winter. Now they also send as many soldier ants as possible to collect food everywhere, and they wish they could scrape the ground 3 feet. The number of soldiers responsible for standing guard and patrolling has reached the lowest level. What's more, the White Hun Coalition Army doesn't think that there will be anyone in the ant kingdoms who is more powerful than their termite empire. If they dare to come to trouble them, wouldn't it be like an old man drinking arsenic to seek death? Even the supreme commander of the White Hun Coalition Army, Pistatu, seems to think so. As a result, the White Hungarian Coalition naturally relaxed its vigilance. The soldiers, who had been tired from carrying food for a day, lay down and fell asleep as soon as it got dark. In the early morning of that day, just after dawn, stones of all sizes flew down from the sky above the various airports where the beetle fighters were parked, and immediately, The beetles who had not yet woken up were smashed to pieces, and blood flew everywhere, killing and injuring countless beetles. In just one morning, all the airports where the beetle fighters were parked suffered a heavy blow. Almost more than 80% of the beetles were killed or injured. Among the remaining uninjured beetles, half were frightened and mentally ill. Only 10% of the remaining beetles still maintained normal combat effectiveness. This sudden disaster stunned the White Hungarian coalition and terrified them. No mistake, one post, one content, one book, one forum, 1619, one book, one forum, take a look. Even the shrewd commander of the coalition forces, Kishini, was shocked and puzzled. What country's army was this? What secret weapons were used? How could it be so powerful? It was unheard of. It turned out that the advanced troops of the Red Ant Army were the ones who raided the Scarab airfield of the White Hungarian coalition forces that Kishini attacked. This time, it was the 5 million advanced troops led by Queen Susan's favorite General Suya who used 100,000 large catapults to sneak attack the Scarab airfield of the White Hungarian coalition forces and achieved unexpected success. In advance, in order to be foolproof, Suya actually spent 10 days sending scouts to secretly scout and locate 9 Scarab airfields. Each airport had 1,000 Scarab fighters parked, and also found out the specific situation of the enemy's deployment around the airport and the patrol team's activity rules. Then, they had to choose a place far enough away from the airport and relatively hidden, where the enemy would not easily find it, and where the airport could be within the range of the large trebuchet, and where the trebuchet could be used as a launching position. In addition, they had to prepare enough shells, small stones, for the trebuchet in advance, and this preparation had to be done at night, when there would certainly be many enemy ants passing by to carry food and grass. Suyi's advanced troops were so careful, but an accident still occurred. It turned out that the Red Ant Army's artillery transport team's stealth action at night was accidentally discovered by a passing enemy ant during the day. Chapter 243 Restoration Operation. What on earth is going on? It's a bit annoying. One afternoon, a grain porter, a worker ant of the White Hungarian coalition, was tired from work and sat on a small white stone to rest. Suddenly, he found many small stones of similar size in the nearby grass. He felt very strange because he had never seen such things before. So he reported this strange thing to his superior. After all, he thought his superior must be more knowledgeable. Sure enough, the superior came to take a look and immediately understood, this may be something from our Vulcan army, accidentally left here. Such important strategic materials are actually thrown away so casually. It's outrageous. I'll call some soldiers and porters to move them all away later. It's really ridiculous. In this way, the catapult shells that the Red Ant vanguard had worked hard for several days to move were taken away by these lucky enemy troops as their own flints. There was no other way. The Red Ant army had to choose a more concealed launch site and hide the pebbles better. Fortunately, this kind of thing did not happen again, otherwise, Suyi's surprise attack on the airport would probably fail. In the 5 million advanced troops led by Suyi, 1 million artillerymen were responsible for operating 100,000 large trebuchets, 2 million artillerymen were responsible for operating 300,000 medium trebuchets, and the remaining 2 million close combat elites, spearmen. In addition, there were 6,000 Scarab fighters led by Isidis Root waiting to be dispatched. After Suyi's advanced troops, the commander-in-chief of the Red Ant Empire, Cordyceps Sinensis, will personally lead 15 million main forces to arrive. Although there are no air forces among them, there are more than 100,000 large trebuchets and 1 million medium trebuchets and their artillery units, 5 million well-trained spear and stick soldier ants. In addition, there are 300,000 mysterious arson commandos, and millions of medical ant soldiers. The above 20 million combat troops are elites selected and trained from 60 million strong soldiers and worker ants. After months of hard training, their strong physique and combat effectiveness are first class. This restoration action has made the Red Ant army even more angry, excited, and high-spirited, as if they have the grand momentum of never giving up until the goal is achieved. Such an army must be invincible, of course, only in this small ant world. Now it can be said that everything is ready except the east wind. After the Red Ant army regains the lost land, more than 200 million residents of the Red Ant Empire, including Queen Susan, will move back to their homeland, including tens of millions of logistics troops and labor forces. Of course, Queen Susan will take the largest and most comfortable Air Force One, a newly domesticated Limang dragonfly, and fly directly from the Susan city-state to the former Kyoto city-state, the homeland of the Red Ant Empire. This limang dragonfly is much stronger than the scarab beetle. It can fly more than 1,000 meters in one breath, and the highest altitude can reach 300 meters. It can also hover in the air for several minutes. It is simply a helicopter. It is so fierce. So, how did such a powerful dragonfly get caught by Susan's subordinates? It turned out that in the evening of that day, this limang dragonfly had just come from a long journey far to the southwest. When passing through the grove outside the Susan city-state, it saw that it was getting late, so it planned to rest here for a night and go on the road again tomorrow. But it was too tired, so it fell asleep quickly. Unexpectedly, it was accidentally discovered by Susan's scarab beetle hunting team. Because it landed on a low leaf not high from the ground, it was quickly captured by the experienced and omnipotent scarab beetle hunting team with spider silk and long grass. Then it was arranged by Susan's best scarab beetle trainer. After 3 months of hard training, it finally became the Air Force, one of the Red Ant Empire, and the special plane for Queen Susan to go out. Once the restoration operation is launched, it will never be abandoned halfway. Because the Red Ant Empire has made full preparations for this military operation, only success is allowed, not failure. The next day, the full-scale counterattack officially began. Yesterday's flying stone bombing of the airport was just an appetizer. In the morning of this day, the Air Force Commander Ban Sangjin personally led 6,000 Beetle bombers to indiscriminately bomb the important strategic locations of the White Hungarian coalition, such as airports, barracks, warehouses, headquarters and military fortresses. As the saying goes, you will have to pay for what you have done sooner or later. Before, Kisini bombed others, and it felt so good that it pissed everyone off. Now, others also come to bomb you for fun, and others also feel so good, and they also want to piss you off, Kisini. This sudden bombing caused Kisini to lose more than half of the 1,500 Beetle fighters that survived in an instant. In the end, it was not easy for 600 to 700 Beetle fighters to flee in panic and hide in the woods and dare not come out. Since the medium-sized trebuchets and the shells they used, small stones, were light in weight, they could be used as mortars when the troops attacked. They moved very quickly with the army and had a huge effect. The enemy had no way to defend against such weapons. The only feasible way was to hide in a solid tunnel. But when the enemy really hid in the tunnel, the large trebuchets of the Red Ant Army came in handy again. They would throw large stones to smash the enemy's tunnels and bury the enemy alive. In long-range combat, the Red Ant Army had powerful trebuchets. In close combat, the Red Ant Army had spears and sticks to deal with. Whether in long-range combat or close combat, the Red Ant Army had an overwhelming advantage. No mistake. In front of the powerful Red Ant Army, the White Hungarian coalition collapsed in an instant, and they fled in all directions. After all, the Red Ant Empire's restoration army now overwhelmed the enemy in terms of numbers, quality, weapons, morale, and preparation. Which vassal and country could resist such a powerful army, even if they all united? Soon, in less than 7 days, the Red Ant Army swept and defeated the White Hungarian coalition at the speed of autumn wind sweeping fallen leaves. The enemy was wiped out before they had time to think or even surrender. I'm so angry also didn't have time to surrender, but was crushed and suffocated in his headquarters tunnel by the stones thrown by the Red Ant Army's large catapult. A generation of heroes ended his life in such a cowardly way, which is really regrettable and regrettable. In the end, the number of White Hungarian coalition soldiers who survived was less than 10% of the total number, about 200,000, and of course they became prisoners of the Red Ant Army. It can be seen that the Red Ant Army's artillery fire was fierce and merciless. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 244 Conquering Japan. In fact, the Red Ant Army had not yet launched all of its trebuchets. Only about half of them were used in this battle, and the rest were kept as backup and for the next battle. Next, the Red Ant Empire's army was divided into two groups. One group of 7 million troops attacked the Japanese Blue Ant Kingdom, and the other group of 8 million troops attacked the U Monkey Ant Kingdom, leaving 5 million troops to garrison the Empire's homeland. The army attacking the Japanese Blue Empire was led by Su Yi, and 4,000 Golden Beetle fighters led by Banlingen were responsible for air cover, mainly to deal with the enemy's possible stink bug bombers. In addition, there were 100,000 large trebuchets and 400,000 medium-sized trebuchets. The army attacking the Yu-Monkey Ant Kingdom was led by the commander-in-chief Dongcheng Xiaokao himself, and only 1,000 Golden Beetle fighters were responsible for air cover, because the enemy had no stink bug bombers and other fighters. In addition, there were 100,000 large trebuchets and 500,000 medium-sized trebuchets. Queen Susan was in charge of the Red Ant Empire, which had an army of 5,100,000 large trebuchets, 400,000 medium trebuchets, and 1,000 scarab fighters. In addition, there were about 400 to 500 scarab fighters captured from the White Hungarian coalition, which were now incorporated into the Red Ant Army Air Force's battle sequence. In addition, more than 230 million Red Ant Empire residents will return home one after another. Among them, the extra 30 million Red Ants were born in recent months by the queens of the original refugee city-states, a total of 93. The rest of the queens were either sick or too old to give birth. The army led by Su Yi to attack the Walan Empire went very smoothly. This was mainly because the Walan Empire had lost 2 major wars in a row in recent months, and its vitality was severely damaged, and it had long lost the ability to resist effectively. Even if it wanted to resist to the end, it seemed that now was not the time. In other words, it could not resist head-on, and could only take the opportunity to shoot cold guns and fight guerrilla warfare. The cordyceps in charge of the army attacking the Yu-Monkey Ant Kingdom did not have the same good luck as Sui. They were either intercepted halfway by the food and grass, or lost a lot of catapults in the enemy's night raid on the military warehouse, or were blocked by the enemy in the military stronghold and fought desperately, or lost countless spears and sticks in the enemy's night raid on the barracks. In a word, the commander-in-chief Cordyceps was exhausted and miserable by this group of Yu-Monkey Ants. It seems that the Yu-Monkey Ant Kingdom not only did not suffer any loss in its military strength, but also gradually strengthened itself by constantly consuming the strength of the Red Ant Army through this despicable means that could not be put on the table. Look, they actually obtained a large number of new weapons through more than half a month of knife theft, the Red Ant Army's catapults and spears and sticks, which can be used to equip a strong enough force. Now they only need to go through a period of training. And with these stolen weapons and equipment, they can also copy them. After all, this thing is too easy to copy. As long as you are not an idiot, anyone can learn it just by taking a look. In this way, the fashionable wind of the new weapon started by the Red Ant Empire soon spread to all the vassal ant countries, and all countries rushed to imitate it, fearing that they would fall behind and suffer losses. The Red Ant Empire's strong military advantage soon disappeared. However, the clever Su Yi knew that the longer the war dragged on, the more disadvantageous it would be for the Red Ant Army. Therefore, he adopted various means to divide the various classes of the Wolan Kingdom. To deal with the enemy troops who resisted stubbornly, he adopted means such as strong attack, siege, inducement and inspiration. For the wealthy businessmen and the upper middle class, he adopted means such as winning over, seduction and coercion. In short, Su Yi's approach was very effective. Now many enemy troops have surrendered, and many wealthy businessmen and many senior officials are willing to cooperate. He even formed several puppet troops to assist him in maintaining daily public order. From this point of view, Su Yi is really a rare talent. Whether it is fighting or management, he is a good hand. On the contrary, the situation of the commander-in-chief was not optimistic at all, but rather had a tendency to deteriorate. Now that winter was approaching, the army's food and grass were repeatedly intercepted by the enemy. Now the army was gradually lacking food, morale was getting lower and lower, and there was already a war weariness. In short, the situation of Dongcheng Xiaokao was very bad. Finally, after much hesitation, he decided to withdraw his troops. In order to avoid greater losses to his troops, he was willing to take the responsibility for the failure of the attack on the Yuhao Ant Kingdom. In early November, the commander-in-chief Dongcheng Xiaokao returned with his army without success, marking the failure of the military operation against the Yuhao Ant Kingdom. Queen Susan did not blame Dongcheng Xiaokao or even say a word of euphemism. After all, there was no major loss in this operation. She only asked Dongcheng Xiaokao to come back and help her rebuild the Red Ant Empire. Dongcheng Xiaokao naturally agreed. In this way, Dong Xiaokao suddenly changed from a marshal commanding the battle on the front line to director in charge of collecting food and grass, building palaces, barracks and various defensive fortifications. Then, Suyi, a rising star, did a great job in the Wolin Kingdom, and all the work was carried out effectively. Now more and more enemy troops surrendered to him, and more wealthy businessmen and people from all walks of life cooperated with him. Why didn't the Wolin Kingdom resist like the Yuhuan Kingdom? Will the tactics used to fight against the not awake White Hungarian coalition last time not work this time? There are many reasons for this. First of all, Suyi is different from not awake. He understands military affairs and terrain. He knows where the enemy may be ambushed, where he can go and where he can't go. No mistakes in one poem, one post, one content, one book, one forum, 1 book, one forum. Second, he attached great importance to food and grass, and guarded them very strictly, so it was difficult for the enemy to take advantage of this loophole. Third, his methods of dealing with the enemy were very flexible and varied. He would treat them differently according to the actual situation, and would never treat them in a one-size-fits-all manner. Fourth, the troops he led were all Red Ant troops, unlike the sleepless coalition of the three countries of White, Hungary and Vietnam, which was difficult to manage. In the end, the Monkey Ant Kingdom of Vietnam fled halfway, causing the morale of the coalition to plummet, and the entire army finally surrendered without a fight. Fifth, he was good at winning people's hearts. He tried every means to seduce and divide the enemy, all classes and wealthy businessmen, to achieve the goal of disintegrating the enemy. Sixth, since the two recent wars were disastrously defeated, the morale of the Japanese Blue Ant Kingdom has reached a level that cannot be lower, and the fresh troops have suffered heavy losses. Now the entire Japanese Blue Army is less than 20% of the level before the two defeats. With an absolute disadvantage in terms of numbers, weapons and morale, who would still be willing to make unnecessary sacrifices? Seventh, the Japanese Blue Ants have always been a country short of food. This year, wars have been frequent, and they have lost a lot of labor after two defeats. No one is going to collect food and grass. Now winter is approaching, and the whole country is about to enter a famine in advance. People are almost starving to death. Who will go to war? Even if they want to fight, they can't walk. In short, now the right time, right place, and right people are all on Suyi's side, and it will be difficult for him not to succeed. Chapter 245: A New Journey. Soon, before the winter was about to come, the once arrogant king of the Walan Empire, Big Stomach, announced unconditional surrender, and the Walan Ant Kingdom officially became a vassal state of the Red Ant Empire, and Suyi's eastward expedition was successful. From then on, Suyi became famous and well known, and he was also named the Imperial Marshal, becoming the only candidate to succeed the Commander-in-Chief Cordyceps Sinensis. The Red Ant Empire also shocked the various vassal ant federations. It is estimated that no one will dare to defend the Red Ant Kingdom for at least 2 years. In the conquered former Walan Empire, Suyi resolutely decided to implement a temporary military control system. All the soldiers and civilians of the Walan Kingdom were allocated food on time according to a certain limit. That is, these soldiers and civilians of the Walan Kingdom were neither full nor hungry, so that they had no extra energy to do bad things, such as making trouble, sabotage, or even rebellion, and at the same time restricting their freedom of movement, not allowed to visit relatives and friends, not allowed to travel far, etc. In addition, Suyi also plans to migrate a large number of soldiers and civilians from the Red Ant Empire to the Walan Kingdom for residence, reclamation and management in the spring of next year. In a nutshell, Suyi means to slowly turn the current Walan Kingdom into a vassal state of the Red Ant Empire, and preferably into a large federation of the Red Ant Empire in the end. Of course, this idea is good, but if you want to turn it into reality, I'm afraid there is still a long way to go. Whether it will succeed in the end depends on God's will. Soon, Dong Xiaokao submitted his resignation to Her Majesty Queen Susan, willing to resign from the position of Commander-in-Chief, and proposed that Suyi take over. Queen Susan approved Dong Xiaokao's resignation, and at the same time formally appointed Suyi as the Commander-in-Chief of the Empire, and also appointed Bailangan as the Chief of Staff of the Imperial General Staff Headquarters, with a rank of General. From then on, the top level of the Red Ant Empire was completely replaced by the new generation, and all became the new generation in power. After rebuilding their homes, The last task of the Red Ant Empire was to conquer the Yuhao Ant Empire, the last major hidden danger. The new commander-in-chief and Imperial Marshal Suyi will take the lead in the expeditionary army, go into battle, make new achievements, and create new glories. However, before the arrival of the spring of next year, the soldiers and civilians of the various ant states can only shrink in the cave, and there is almost nothing to do except eating, drinking, defecating, urinating, and sleeping. The long and cold winter is finally over, and spring is coming. The various ant states are eager to move. This time is different from usual. In the past, at this time, everyone was focused on finding food. Now, in addition to finding food, they have a more urgent task, which is to find materials for making new weapons, trebuchets, spears and sticks. However, for the Red Ant Empire, the most urgent task at present is still to raise food and grass. As for making new weapons, there is no hurry at all. After all, these new weapons were originally invented by the Red Ant Empire. There are still many of them in hand, which are completely enough. They just need to add some shells, small stones. At present, the most troublesome problem for the commander of the Red Ant Army, Suyi, is neither weapons nor food, but the strategy and tactics of conquering the U-Monkey Ant Kingdom, that is, how to give full play to the new weapons invented by the Red Ant Empire. This problem seems simple, but it is actually very complicated. First of all, the terrain of the U-Monkey Ant Kingdom is very complex, which is not conducive to large-scale combat. Secondly, the U-Monkey ants are very good at digging holes in the ground. I don't know when they will come out from where to attack our army. They are just like Earth tigers, which makes people unpredictable. To deal with such a difficult opponent, the usual combat mode seems to be ineffective. In order to find a way to fight against the enemy, Suyi has put in a lot of effort and brainstorming, and many brain cells have died. Finally, he thought of a more effective but somewhat risky method. After considering it more maturely, Suyi reported this combat plan against Vietnam to Her Majesty Queen Susan for approval. A few days later, Queen Susan approved the battle plan and told him to think more and avoid rash actions. In the following days, Suyi issued instructions to mobilize all officers and soldiers to move non-stop, collect food and fodder, collect weapons, practice formations, conduct combat exercises, and so on. Soon it was the season of spring and flowers, and the beetles were released from the warm basement, and the killer weapon of the Red Ant Empire finally returned to the team. Suyi led the Red Ant Empire's 10 million troops and divided them into 5 routes to the south. Basically, each route had 2 million red ants. The vanguard of each army, opening roads when encountering mountains and building bridges when encountering water, was 500,000 soldier ants, and after a long distance, another 1.5 million main forces would follow. And these 5 armies were not too far away from each other, so they could coordinate and support each other and share what they had. At this time, the former famous commander of the 3 armies of Yuhao Ant Kingdom, Stinky Monkey, was poisoned in the last defeat and became unconscious. Not long after, he died of illness. Now the commander of the 3 armies of Yuhao Ant Kingdom is called Don't Take It Seriously. Why is it called such a strange name? This is because the commander of the U army, although he has some ability, is suspicious by nature, doubts everything, and does not trust anyone, so everyone has to call him Don't Take It Seriously. No mistake, 1 post, 1 content, 1 6, 1 9, 1 book, 1 bar. It can be seen that this guy must be very cautious and timid, and dare not take risks. When Don't Take It Seriously learned that the Red Ant Empire was led by the famous General Suyi and divided into 5 routes to the south, he was immediately scared to tears, not scared to pee. However, another U frontline scout reported that the vanguard of each enemy army was only about 500,000, and was separated from the large army behind by a long distance. Upon hearing the news, Don't Take It Seriously immediately burst into laughter, thinking, "Tisk, I thought this Suyi was an amazing general. Now it seems that he is nothing special. Today, I will make you, Suyi, come in with a smile, and go back crying." It was as if Don't Take It Seriously had long forgotten that he had just been scared and cried. Perhaps it felt that it should let Suyi cry, so that it would feel a little balanced in its heart. So, Don't Take It Seriously immediately convened generals at all levels to study the battle plan and discuss how to eat up the vanguards of the 5 enemy armies. An old veteran who had been battle-hardened shook his tentacles in confusion and said, "The enemy commander Suyi is a well-known general. It is unlikely that he would make such a low-level mistake, right?" Chapter 246, 5 Groups of Troops. Yes, maybe this is a trap, waiting for us to fall into it. Another Vietnamese general who had fought with the Red Ant Army for a long time also shook his tentacles and agreed. Then, what should we do? The suspicious don't take it seriously immediately became cautious after being reminded by the 2 Vietnamese generals. I don't think this is necessarily a trap set by Su Yi. Maybe his generals think that the Red Ant Army is invincible and do not take our monkey ant army seriously, so they make the mistake of underestimating the enemy and advancing rashly. After all, such a good opportunity does not come every day, so we must not miss it. Another young and energetic Vietnamese general expressed his own unique opinion. This time, don't take it seriously, and the other generals were in a dilemma. Faced with such a God-given opportunity, it was like a mouse meeting bacon or a lazy cat meeting fresh fish. Who wouldn't salivate? But they were afraid that it was a trap, afraid of stealing a chicken but losing a rice, and they felt very embarrassed. After a long silence, Don't Take It Seriously suddenly looked up at everyone, waved his tentacles and said, "Which master has a good plan?" The veteran touched the tentacles with his claws and said slowly, "As long as we apply the tactics properly and grasp the timing well, we may be able to fight." Then how should this tactic be applied and how should the timing be grasped? Can you tell me clearly, old general? Don't Take It Seriously shook his tentacles and asked humbly. Well, the veteran touched his tentacles carefully and said, "We must go to the site for a field investigation." Then where should we go for a field investigation? Don't Take It Seriously didn't quite understand. Of course, we have to inspect the strategic location where the enemy will pass. I see. It's true that old hands make the best. So what are we waiting for? Let's set off now and take the guide with us. After 2 days and 2 nights of forced march, Don't Take It Seriously led the generals and guards to a strategic location they thought the enemy was most likely to pass through, a large canyon. Hey! This place is really good. Don't Take It Seriously stood on a cliff in the canyon, waving his tentacles excitedly and said to his men, "It's great to set up an ambush here." "Great. Really great," all the generals echoed, except for the veteran on the battlefield who remained silent as he looked at the canyon in front of him. "Hey, Harris, Don't Take It Seriously," asked the veteran on the battlefield, "what do you think?" "Well," veteran Harris touched his tentacles with his claws again, and said thoughtfully, "I always feel uneasy in my heart, and I'm not as optimistic as everyone else." "Are you scared by Suyi's reputation?" Don't Take It Seriously said disapprovingly, in front of him. "You always feel unsure." "Maybe that's the case." Harris was still frightened, paused, and said with a frown, "Maybe I'm too cautious. Maybe Suyi is not as powerful as we thought. We might as well fight here and see how powerful Suyi is." "Okay. That's great." Don't Take It Seriously was very happy to get the support of veteran Harris. "I want to see what kind of person this Suyi is. I really want to learn a lesson from him." Then, Don't Take It Seriously arrogantly ordered all the generals, "Everyone, go back and prepare immediately. And try to ambush all the participating troops here within 2 days. I estimate that the enemy may arrive here in 3 days. I am waiting for the good news of your triumphant return at the headquarters." This time, Don't Take It Seriously was full of confidence, and contrary to his usual behavior, he really took the ambush as a possible victory. So, is it really as simple as Don't Take It Seriously and his gang imagined? Of course not. If Suyi was so mentally retarded, he would not have become a famous general of a generation. 3 days later in the morning, the sun was shining brightly, the weather was hot, and there was no wind in the air. A certain vanguard of the Red Ant Army gradually approached the mouth of the canyon. In fact, according to human-size standards, there are 2 routes from the Red Ant Empire in the north to the Monkey Ant Kingdom in the southeast, one by water and one by land. The water route has a river and 2 small streams, and the land route has only a winding path through the jungle. The rest of the place is dense primeval forest. According to this situation, the commander-in-chief of the 3 armies of the Red Ant Empire, Suyi, decided to divide the troops into 5 routes. 2 of the armies would advance southward along the banks of the only river flowing to the Monkey Ant Kingdom. Because the water in the river was too fast for the ants to sail, they had to give up sailing on this river and instead advance along the banks of the river. And 2 naval forces, each with tens of thousands of palm leaves and hundreds of water beetles carrying 2 million ant soldiers and new weapons such as catapults and spears, would go south along 2 small streams. The remaining army would naturally take the only path through the jungle, and Suyi distributed about 3,000 scarab bombers to this army, and more than 2,000 scarabs to the 2 armies going south along the banks of the river, and another 2,000 scarabs to the two naval forces going south along the stream. This army walking alone on the jungle trail seemed to be weak and full of dangers, just like a lone army deep into the enemy's territory. After all, this road was almost the only way for the U-Monkey Ant Kingdom to attack the Red Ant Empire. However, what was unexpected was that the commander-in-chief of the three armies, Su Yi, was also in the team of this army. He had to personally command the most dangerous battle. No mistake, one sentence, one post, one content, 1-6, 1-9, one book, one bar. However, he has not yet taken up residence in the vanguard, but in the large army behind. Of course, it is not all cowardly and afraid of death, but for the overall consideration, so as to better command the battle. Su Yi used 100 beetle fighters between the vanguard of this army and the main force behind to patrol and transmit messages, while the other beetles, as the main force, slowly advanced with the main force, flying and stopping, leisurely. At noon that day, Su Yi received a message from the frontline scouts, which was passed on by the artillery ants on the backs of the scarab beetles returning from patrol. The pioneers of the vanguard of the front found a winding canyon. After receiving this report, Su Yi immediately realized that the first battle in the territory of the U-Monkey Ants was about to begin. Without any hesitation, Su Yi immediately ordered all the scarab beetle fighters of the army to go to the canyon in front, find the U-Monkey Ants hiding and ambushing on the cliffs on both sides of the canyon, and bomb them with all their strength, without mercy, to wipe them out completely, leaving no one behind. The scarab beetle bombers that were flying slowly and leisurely behind the large army immediately seemed to have changed into a different person after receiving the order from Su Yi. They all rushed to the front canyon in a swarm. Chapter 247 Monkey Show Operation. When they arrived at the mouth of the Grand Canyon, they immediately split into two teams and flew towards the cliffs on both sides of the canyon, searching carefully for hidden Vietnamese troops while flying. Soon, they found a dense ambush of Vietnamese troops in the weeds on the cliffs. Then, bad luck began to befall this group of unlucky Vietnamese monkey ant officers and soldiers who were dreaming of making merit and receiving awards. The scarab bombers in the sky, like a large dark cloud, mercilessly carried out a carpet-style bombing on the Don't Take It Seriously troops ambushed on the cliffs on both sides of the canyon, making this group of self-righteous Vietnamese soldiers complain bitterly, and the wailing of being burned by formic acid continued to rise and fall. The painful and helpless breath of the Vietnamese monkey ants soon filled the entire canyon. According to preliminary estimates, in this battle, the Vietnamese monkey ant army lost more than 1.8 million officers and soldiers, which made Don't Take It Seriously very painful and sad. In a sense, this failure was a disaster for the U-Monkey Ant army of Bai Dangzhen. Why do I say that? Because through the battle between the Red Ant Kingdom and the U-Monkey Ant Kingdom, Bai Dangzhen and his men learned the power of Su Yi. From then on, Bai Dangzhen did not dare to fight easily, and therefore missed many fleeting good opportunities. At the same time, this also laid a good foundation for Su Yi to deploy troops calmly in the future. In other words, after the battle, Su Yi can easily lead the U-Monkey Ant army by the nose. In fact, we can also call the battles after the Su Yi Monkey Show action. The place where the U-Monkey Ant Kingdom is entrenched belongs to the subtropical or temperate zone, which is full of dense jungles and weeds, but there are also a small part of grassland and wetlands. In view of the terrain and landforms of U-Kingdom, Su Yi decided not to cut across the board, but to adopt the strategy of adapting to local conditions and treating differently. The army led by Su Yi only traveled through canyons, grasslands and wetlands, not jungles, and only camped overnight in these places. In view of the fact that the enemy army could not use fire attacks and could only dig holes in the ground like groundhogs, Su Yi built a camp on gravel on relatively hard land as much as possible, and adopted the 10 vertical and 10 horizontal, densely packed camping method, and also arranged some guards to stand guard at night to prevent the enemy from attacking at night. When the two armies advancing along the two banks of the river reached a location designated by Su Yi, Central U, they stopped advancing and began to search from the riverbank to the depths of the jungle on both sides. Su Yi asked the two armies to destroy small enemy forces if they met them in the jungle, and to find a big tree nearby, climb up the tree, and stand ready on the branches and leaves if they met large enemy forces. If the enemy followed and climbed up the tree, they would use the spears and sticks in their hands, these new weapons, to attack the enemy from a high position. The two Red Ant naval forces that followed the stream and rode on the leaves to the south, according to the pre-war deployment, drifted downstream to the southernmost tip of U State, and then went ashore. The two naval forces soon met on land. And then, under the leadership of the naval general manager, Lu Obuma, they searched and advanced from south to north. The specific tactics were similar to those of the previous two armies, so I will not repeat them here. Since our army had more new weapons than the enemy, and also mastered the martial arts skills taught by Queen Susan, and our soldiers were tall and strong and delicious compared to the Vietnamese army, our army's combat effectiveness far exceeded that of the enemy under the condition of ensuring the supply of food and grass. In this way, it was easy to implement the Suya policy. Seeing that the Suya tactics were steady and watertight, and were slowly surrounding them, the commander-in-chief of the three armies of the Monkey Ant Kingdom was really anxious and angry. Don't take it seriously, and there was no way out. Every day he was like an ant on a hot pot. As the saying goes, when it rains, it pours. At this time, when the queen of the Monkey Ant Empire, Sneezy, she was called this because she had chronic rhinitis and sneezed all the time, so we just call her Sneezy. As for her real name, I can't remember it, heard that the Red Ant Empire had launched a large-scale attack on her country and was gaining victory after victory. She was furious and immediately cursed all of Bai Dangzhen's 18 generations of ancestors, and immediately sent the imperial court censor to give Bai Dangzhen a death order, forcing Bai Dangzhen to immediately send troops to fight the Red Ant army with all his strength, otherwise he would kill his entire family and exterminate his 9 clans. At this time, Bai Dangzhen, who was already burnt out, had no choice but to go all out and risk his life. He sent all his troops, about 17 million monkey ants, to deal with the 2 routes of the Red Ant army, totaling 4 million, that landed from the southernmost tip of U. As long as these 2 enemy forces are eliminated, the Monkey Ant army can break through and retreat southward. At the same time, Don't Take It Seriously also asked the imperial censor to quickly inform Her Majesty the Queen Sneezing to prepare to move the whole country southward and make a strategic shift. At the beginning, there was no enemy, but now there are enemies all over the mountains and plains. This emergency makes the officers and soldiers of the Red Ants feel very exciting and stressed. Now they can only fight bravely to the death. In front of the tall and strong and advanced weapons Red Ant army, the Monkey Ant army seemed like a fool who came to die, and died in large numbers. On the other hand, the Red Ant army, one by one, was vigorous and more courageous, as if they had become mowers, very skillfully swinging spears and sticks, sweeping and slashing, and those Monkey Ants who were hit were either beheaded, or their waists were broken or their arms and legs were broken. It was really either dead or injured, which was simply horrible. Did the Vietnamese army also learn to use spears and sticks? Could it be that the enemy was holding lollipops? Of course not lollipops, but because the enemy was small and weak, and was not good at using these new weapons skillfully, they could only cause some minor damage to the Red Ant army instead of fatal casualties. From the overall effect, the weapons in the hands of the enemy were not much different from lollipops. As a result, the situation on the battlefield became a one-sided situation. Before an hour, the number of casualties of the Vietnamese army exceeded 1 million, while the number of casualties of the Red Ant army was less than 1/10 of the enemy, and these casualties were mainly caused by the enemy digging holes and suddenly emerging from the ground to strangle the lower limbs. No mistake, 1 poem, 1 post, 1 content, 1 6, 1 9, 1 book, 1 bar, 1 look. As a result, when the sun set in the evening, the total number of casualties of the enemy army rose to more than 5 million, while the Red Ant army had not yet reached 400,000. So far, in today's battle, it can be said that the Red Ant army won a great victory. However, the intensity and volatility of the following battles were shocking. Chapter 248 The Changing Situation. On the next day, because it was summer, the sun broke through the clouds early and illuminated the earth. The enemy and us once again resolutely engaged in the battle. Both sides tried their best, and the war became more cruel and fierce. This time, the Vietnamese army learned to be cunning and adopted a new tactic. Many Vietnamese monkey ants climbed up the tall green grass leaves, took advantage of the rebound force, opened their claws and threw themselves at the Red Ant soldiers, hugged the opponent's neck or body tightly, making it impossible for the opponent to use spears and sticks. At the same time, they used their sharp teeth to bite and chew the opponent's head and body to eliminate the opponent. In addition, the Vietnamese monkey ant army also used poison gas bombs in areas where the Red Ant army had a local advantage in numbers. The 2 nasty spores of the poisonous fungus parasitic in the bodies of the Red Ant soldiers, and launched an inhumane too nasty bacterial warfare against the Red Ant Army. This despicable tactic has been used before. When the enemy suddenly used these despicable tactics, the number of casualties of the Red Ant Army immediately rose sharply, and the total number of casualties soon exceeded 1 million, while the enemy's casualties were gradually decreasing. Little by little, the Red Ant Army could no longer hold on. Seeing that the battlefield situation suddenly took a sharp turn for the worse, the commander-in-chief of the two armies of the Red Ant Army, Luo Buma, had to order the entire army to retreat, and find nearby big trees to climb, and all retreated to the branches and leaves of the big trees. At the same time, he ordered the 2,000 Scarab fighter planes that were waiting for the opportunity behind the army to fly over immediately and carry out indiscriminate bombing on the aggressive enemy in front of them. Not long after, the Scarab fighter fleet, like a large dark cloud, launched one violent bombing after another at the large groups of Vietnamese monkey ant troops on the ground who were enjoying the joy of their first victory. Acid rain fell from the sky, and suddenly, the enemy troops fell down in large numbers like plastic melting, and the breath of formic acid and the painful and miserable smell of the Vietnamese monkey ants suddenly floated around the battlefield. The remaining Vietnamese troops immediately looked for places to hide. Some dug holes, some climbed trees, and some hid in the weeds. The battlefield situation was reversed again. The battle in the southern theater was going on fiercely, while the northern and central theaters were quiet, with no major movement, except for sporadic small-scale fighting. This situation seemed a bit beyond Suyi's expectations. Since that battle, his unit had not seen a single hair of the enemy. Just when Suyi was somewhat puzzled, two beetles flew from the southern theater and brought the latest news, which made Suyi finally understand the strategic intention of the Yu Hao Ant Kingdom to escape. He immediately ordered the entire army to advance southward at a rapid speed to reinforce the two naval forces fighting bravely in the southern theater. At this time, the southern battle had entered the most critical moment. The leader of the Red Ant Army, Luo Buma, also felt that the enemy had signs of desperately breaking through. He asked all the soldiers to grit their teeth and resist bravely. With the participation of the beetle fighters, the Red Ant Army quickly turned the disadvantage around and is now fighting back. Both sides suffered heavy casualties. The Red Ant Army has suffered more than half of its casualties. The original army of 4 million people is now only more than 1.8 million, while the Vietnamese monkey ant army has lost more than 10 million people. Now there are only 5 to 6 million soldiers who are still capable of fighting. Looking at the rapidly changing situation in front of him, Don't Take It Seriously was extremely anxious, but he could do nothing about it. He knew very well that before the Golden Beetle joined the battle, the combat effectiveness of the General Red Ant Army was 3 or 4 times that of the Vietnamese army. Now that the Red Ant Army has joined the Golden Beetle, its combat effectiveness has increased by several times. What's more, the Red Ant Army from other directions is rapidly approaching here. If he cannot break through within these 2 days, then Don't Take It Seriously will only have one way to go, which is surrender. When the troops of Bai Dangzhen were about to collapse, they suddenly saw the Imperial censor coming back excitedly. Bai Dangzhen was puzzled and asked what was going on. The Imperial censor quickly told Bai Dangzhen that he had brought the reserve army of Yu Monkey Ant Country 13 million troops, which would arrive soon. Bai Dangzhen was overjoyed when he heard it, and immediately ordered to recall the troops and fight again the next day. The commander of the Red Ant Army, Luo Buma, felt a little strange. The enemy army withdrew its troops so early today to avoid the battle. Was it going to play some conspiracy again? Luo Buma was really worried at this moment. It was not for anything else, but the trump card in his hand. The bomber of the Beetle was about to run out of ammunition. The battle to intercept the enemy in the south of Yu was very difficult, and the ammunition of the Beetle fighter, formic acid, was wasted a lot. Why did this happen? The specific reasons are roughly as follows. First, the Scarab fighters of the Red Ant Army had never fought in the primitive jungle, lacked experience, were not well prepared for the battle, and did not perform at the level they should have. Second, the visibility in the jungle was low, and the Scarabs were often blocked by weeds, branches and leaves, so the artillery ants often missed the target. Third, the Vietnamese monkey ant army was good at jungle warfare and good at using the terrain to play a hide-and-seek game with the Scarab fighters, making it difficult for the Scarabs to find or pinpoint the specific location of the enemy for precise strikes. In summary, the attack efficiency of the Scarab fighters in recent days of battles has been getting lower and lower, while the enemy has become more and more cunning, and seems to have found an effective way to avoid the bombing of the Scarab fighters. At this time, the Scarab artillery ants had very little ammunition left, which means that the Scarabs could no longer participate in the battle. However, the enemy brought in a powerful reserve army, 13 million Vietnamese monkey ant soldiers. As one side gained strength while the other lost strength, the battlefield situation reversed again and turned to the side of the monkey ants, which was very unfavorable to the Red Ant army. It seems that tomorrow's battle will be particularly difficult for our army. Luo Ma pondered and finally came up with a more useful temporary defense method, which was to build 3 earth walls at the front line overnight, which were as high as 3 or 4 Red Ant soldiers, and build 3 lines of defense to block the enemy's attack. He immediately ordered all officers and soldiers to carry forward the spirit of not fearing fatigue and fighting continuously, and all went to the battlefield, using the 2 shifts, divided into sleeping and working in the first and second half of the night, to build these 3 lines of defense overnight. When dawn came, the 3 lines of defense were basically formed, and at 8 o'clock in the morning, they were all completed. No mistake, 1 poem, 1 post, 1 content, 1 6, 1 book, 1 bar, 1 look. Not far in front of the first line of defense, the monkey ant army rushed towards the Red Ant army like a black mass. Luo Ma hurriedly ordered the best-rested soldiers to immediately climb up to the earthen wall of the first line of defense to defend against the enemy. The soldiers who had rested a little more climbed to the second line of defense to be ready to fight at any time, and the rest of the soldiers slept and rested behind the third line of defense to recuperate. Luo Ma did this in order to delay the enemy as much as possible, so that reinforcements could arrive at any time. Chapter 249 The Last Fight. After the Red Ants adopted this defensive strategy, some of the enemy's tactics were no longer useful, such as using the elasticity of tall grass to fly towards the enemy so as to hug the enemy's neck. This tactic was no longer effective. This was because the Red Ants had already removed all kinds of weeds not far from the 3 lines of defense last night. The monkey ants, like a plague of locusts, came one after another, one row after another, thousands upon thousands, layer upon layer, one after another, like a large and very thick black cloud, pressing towards the first line of defense of the Red Ants with great momentum, which was shocking and dumbfounding. Seeing this, many Red Ants' legs and hands trembled, and it seemed that they could not even hold the weapons in their hands. However, most of the soldiers were still full of passion and high morale. They were not afraid of death. They had seen many of their companions die, so they were numb to death. What they wanted most now was to fight a good battle. In the blink of an eye, the enemy rushed to the front. For this group of monkey ants who are good at digging holes, the slope earth wall built by the Red Ant army overnight was not taken seriously at all. They climbed up in a few steps and then launched a fierce attack on the lower 3 plates of the Red Ant soldiers. The Red Ant army would certainly not let the enemy's conspiracy succeed. Seeing that there were too many enemies rushing up, they used the sweeping stick method to attack the enemy. The Red Ant army swept away a few enemy ants that came up, swept away a group that came up, swept away another group that came up again. In short, the enemy must not be allowed to attack the wall. Under the bold and fierce attack of the Red Ant army, the enemy had no way to rush to this defensive earth wall for a while. Seeing this, the commander-in-chief, don't take it seriously, hiding behind this large group of Vietnamese monkey ant soldiers, had to change his tactics. He immediately adopted the suggestion of Harris, a veteran who stayed beside him. He set up a human ladder made of 7 or 8 ants in front of the first line of defense of the Red Ant army, where the spears and sticks of the Red Ant army soldiers could not reach. He let the artillery ants of the Vietnamese monkey ants stand on the top of it, aiming their butts at the Red Ant army on the earth wall and firing formic acid bombs. At the same time, he sent another group of Vietnamese monkey ants who were best at digging holes to drill holes not far from the earth wall, trying to cross the earth wall of the Red Ant army from underground by digging holes. Moreover, Don't Take It Seriously did not relax his frontal attack on the first line of defense of the Red Ant army because of this. It can be said to be a 3-pronged approach. Under such a cunning and fierce offensive by the Vietnamese army, the first line of defense of the Red Ant army was soon breached. As the gaps became more and more, this line of defense collapsed. This was mainly due to the acid bomb attack of the enemy artillery ants, and the enemy dug holes underground through the earth wall and attacked the Red Ant army from behind, making the Red Ant army attack from both sides, thus breaking through the first line of defense of the Red Ant army. Next, the monkey ant army swarmed to the second line of defense of the Red Ant army, intending to follow the same method just now. Seeing that the enemy actually adopted such a fighting method, the leader of the Red Ant Army, Luo Buma, felt his scalp tingling. How to deal with such a cunning and vicious enemy, Luo Buma seemed to have no idea at all, and he couldn't help but fall into hard thinking. What to do? What to do? Soon, the vicious monkey ant army easily broke through the second line of defense, and then rushed to the last line of defense of the Red Ant Army without stopping. As long as the last line of defense of the Red Ant Army was broken, it would be like breaking through the encirclement of the Red Ant Army, and it would be easy to evacuate from then on. Seeing that the enemy's conspiracy was about to succeed, Luo Buma was so anxious that he jumped straight, but he was helpless. Suddenly, the Red Ants found that the enemy troops, who were stacked in layers and surging like waves, were in chaos. They were like someone had poked a hornet's nest. They were running for their lives in all directions in a crowded and chaotic manner. The enemy seemed to have collapsed without a fight. What was going on? All the officers and soldiers of the Red Ants were confused and puzzled. However, they soon found the answer. Sure enough, in the blink of an eye, a large group of scarab fighters appeared in the sky like a dark cloud, and they were throwing acid bombs recklessly at the chaotic and crowded monkey ant colony under their bellies. At this time, the Red Ant Army artillery ants on the back of the scarab did not need to aim at all, and they could hit the target with their eyes closed. That was because there were too many monkey ants, and there was nowhere to hide in this relatively small space. In addition, the monkey ant country reserve army that had recently joined the Don't Take It Seriously force had no combat experience at all and did not know how to avoid the bombardment of the scarab fighters, so it caused huge casualties. It is roughly estimated that about 1/3 of the reserve army disappeared from then on. The enemy's powerful offensive in the morning failed with the arrival of the Red Ant Army reinforcements, the advance team of Suyi reinforcements, 3,000 scarab bombers. The enemy almost broke through the last line of defense of Labma. Thinking of this, Labma was still frightened. On the contrary, Don't Take It Seriously is really painful and regrettable. After all, who wouldn't be angry and annoyed when encountering this failure at the last minute? All afternoon, there was no movement in front of the Red Ant Army's position. Could it be that the enemy was scared and dared not come? Of course, although this is indeed a major reason, it is a pity that it is not all. Before the sun was about to set, another large number of beetle fighters flew to the southern theater to help. This is the air support force under the central theater, and there are about 2,000 beetle fighters. In this way, Suyi almost threw all of his air force to the southern theater to support the Labma troops to block the enemy's retreat to the south. No mistakes in one poem, one post, one content, one book, one bar, 1619. However, at this moment, the enemy commander Don't Take It Seriously suffered another great defeat, but he still wanted to make a last-ditch effort and planned to make a last stand at midnight tonight. Now the Red Ant Army has also suffered heavy casualties. Labma's troops have been reduced from the original 4 million troops to less than 800,000 troops, while the enemy has at least tens of millions. The enemy is numerous and we are few, and the power comparison is so disparate, which makes Labma and his generals very worried. However, fortunately, thousands of scarab fighters came to help in time, otherwise, our army would definitely lose. If it was daytime, it would be fine. With the participation of scarab fighters, Labma is not afraid of the enemy's attack, but if it is at night. Sure enough, what pot is not open, it is brought up. The more you fear something, the more it will come, which is really infuriating. Just before midnight, suddenly, the enemy troops all over the mountains and plains emerged from the ground, and just like in the daytime, they rushed towards the Red Ants of Labma in large groups. This might be the enemy's last chance. Will the enemy's wish come true? The answer will be revealed soon. Chapter 250, The Fall of You. Faced with the enemy's rampant attack, the Red Ant Army soldiers all shared the same hatred and fought bravely, ready to die. After all, the remaining 800,000 soldiers were all veterans who had been on the battlefield for a long time and were indifferent to everything. The enemy really still used the old and effective tactics used during the day: firing, impacting, and digging holes, three-pronged approach. While Labma let his men fight to the death to block the enemy's attack, he naturally would not let the beetles watch the fun. He asked the 2 batches of beetle fighters that came to reinforce during the day to all be stationed on the leaves of nearby trees, and divided them into 2 batches to bomb the enemy ant colony in turn. After each beetle bombed, it flew back to the leaves. It could be the original leaves or new leaves. Although it was not clear at night, The beetle fighters belonging to the Suyu direct troops were experienced in the battlefield. They could actually attack the enemy based on the unique smell of the monkey ants. The stronger the smell, the more enemy ants there must be. The 2,000 scarabs under Lobma also camped on the leaves. In the past 2 days, they did not participate in the battle because the artillery ants lack acid bombs. However, they were not idle. These diligent artillery ants kept chewing leaves to make enough formic acid in their stomachs to provide shells for the scarab fighters. Some artillery ants were uncomfortable because they ate too much and even rolled off the leaves, while some artillery ants had diarrhea because they ate too much. At this time, the enemy and us on the battlefield were coming and going, presenting a stalemate. The enemy relied on ground forces, with large numbers and strength, and frantically attacked our army's last line of defense, while our army mainly relied on the powerful Air Force Scarab fighters to carry out carpet-style bombing on the enemy's dense areas to slow down the enemy's attack. On the scene, the enemy and us really each has its own merits and reached a temporary balance. At this moment, Lobma found that the artillery on the enemy's ladder was the most dangerous to us, so he ordered the beetles to bombard it. In this way, the pressure on our army was relieved to a certain extent, which made Lobma relieved. As time went by, the enemy's offensive gradually weakened. Now, it is the turn of Don't Take It Seriously and the Queen of the Monkey Ant Kingdom sneezes and officials at all levels to be anxious and worried. It seems that this anxiety is also the wind and water turn. Seeing that the sky is about to dawn, finally, Don't Take It Seriously gritted his teeth and stamped his feet, made up his mind, and gambled everything. All the new and old troops were all invested in the west of the Red Ant Army's defense line, intending to spare no effort to break through a certain point as a breakthrough to tear open the Red Ant Army's last line of defense. The enemy's last-ditch struggle finally began. This time, every enemy soldier seemed to be rushing forward desperately. The human ladders that served as stepping stones for the artillery ants also went forward one after another, building up the ground desperately. After being blown up by the scarab beetles, they were rebuilt. The earth tigers that dug holes in the ground were also digging desperately. The Red Ant Army soldiers, who were already exhausted, had to muster up their energy and barely cope with the even more frenzied attacks of the Vietnamese army. The scarab beetles did not get any rest, and frequently carried out the final bombardment on the enemy's densely populated points and enemy artillery positions, the human ladder groups. With a huge consumption of scarab beetle ammunition, our army's effective bombing became less and less, while the enemy's offensive continued unabated. Seeing that the enemy was about to break through the earth wall, our army's last line of defense, the anxious Lobma asked his own 2,000 scarab beetle fighters that had recovered their ammunition to join the battle sequence to bomb the enemy. The group of beetle fighters, which had replenished more than half of their ammunition and had been resting for 2 days, immediately flew out from the leaves and carried out fierce and accurate bombing on the important locations of the enemy ant colony, because it was almost dawn and they were more and more visible. With the addition of this group of old beetle fighters, the last line of defense of the Red Ant Army was stabilized again. On the contrary, the morale of the enemy began to decline and the offensive began to slow down. At this time, the enemy's rear troops were in turmoil again, and the phenomenon of chaos and congestion occurred again. Could it be that new reinforcements of our army had arrived again? Sure enough, this time the fast horse was a large army from the Central Theater, the one that originally advanced southward along the 2 banks of the river, with a number of about 2 million. They were the closest to the other 3 armies of Suyu, so they were the first army to arrive here except for the beetles. At this time, the monkey ant army, including the new and old troops, had been exhausted after several days of continuous fighting, and the number had dropped from 18 million at its peak to about 7 million today, and there were many old, weak and disabled among them. After seeing the new reinforcements from our army, the enemy's morale plummeted, and many soldiers ran away, fearing that they could not run fast enough. After the addition of these 2 million reinforcements, the morale of our army was greatly boosted, and they began to counterattack the army. Troops without the will to fight are like a pile of loose sand, in a mess, and can only be slaughtered. Under the powerful counterattack of the Red Ant Army, the demoralized and defeated Vietnamese army soon had no choice but to surrender. The captives naturally included Don't Take It Seriously and the minister appointed by the Queen of the Monkey Ant Kingdom, the imperial censor, and a group of officials of all sizes. No mistakes in one poem, one post, one content, one book, one forum, 1619, one book, one forum. A few days later, Suyu personally led 2 million of his own troops and intercepted a large group of troops, 8 million ant soldiers and 35 million subjects of the fleeing Yuhao Ant Kingdom Queen Sneezy on a remote path. It turned out that this Sneezy Queen was not stupid at all. She actually understood the military strategy of openly repairing the plank road and secretly crossing Chenkang. She deliberately let Bai Dangzhen lead a large group of troops to break out from the southwest, while she led her guards and loyal subjects to sneak away to the southeast. Fortunately, the resourceful Suyi expected that things would not be so simple, so he saw through the Sneezy Queen's trick, and personally led the team to chase after several days, and finally caught up with and intercepted the enemy's retreat. Seeing so many enemies in front of him, Suyi, who was at a great disadvantage, decided to use fire attack. After the enemy completely entered a large canyon, Suyi set fire at both ends of the enemy team, that is, at both ends of the canyon, making the enemy difficult to advance or retreat. Then he ordered the Red Ant Army, which had been ambushing on the cliffs on both sides of the canyon for a long time, to throw dry branches, hay, dead leaves and other things at the large group of people in the canyon, and then throw the burning dead leaves and branches into the U-monkey ants. About an hour later, the queen of the U-monkey ant kingdom, Sneeze, her guards, entourage and subjects were annihilated. From then on, the U-monkey ant empire was wiped out from the map of the ant world by Suyi. A few days later, Suyi and several other troops met in the capital of the former U-monkey ant kingdom. Although there were still 20 to 30 million untouchables abandoned by Sneeze, they all became prisoners of the Red Ant Army and were forced to serve hard labor in the country as slaves by Suyi. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.